Chapter 640. In fact, before Qin Wentian comprehended the true intent of his mandate, he had already attempted to fuse his mandates. The void imprint, void halberd art, the fusion of the mandate of dreams and the mandate of force. It was just that this fusion was still shallow, and now that his mandates had transformed into true intent, he needed a brand new fusion. On the desolate land, Qin Wentian wielded an ancient halberd in his hands as he stabbed out again and again. Every strike of his halberd contained shocking might, as though boundless energy was condensed into a single point, erupting forth with terrifying might. With the experience of fusing wills, Qin Wentian unceasingly attempted to fuse two different true intents into a single innate technique. True intent. What is true intent? True intent is the embodiment of a certain type of energy. Qin Wentian murmured in a low voice. After many attempts, he closed his eyes and tried to comprehend Di Tian's battle once more. As Di Tian's strength grew stronger, some of the experts in that dimension started to fuse their innate techniques with their true intents against him. The newly manifested energy seemed to be brand new, and didn't belong to any of the individual true intents. Sometimes, it was even hard to tell what type of true intent was contained within their attacks. On both sides, Di Tian fought, while Qin Wentian comprehended. Day after day, Qin Wentian's comprehension and usage of true intent grew stronger and stronger. Today, Qin Wentian was still brandishing his ancient halberd again and again. Thousands, tens of thousands of times he didn't feel the slightest fatigue. This was his obsession. If he wanted to become stronger, he had to endure this sort of boredom. Although his comprehension ability wasn't bad, and he would occasionally gain enlightenment, he wouldn't be able to do it every single time. No matter how talented a character was, if he didn't have the mental fortitude to never give up, it would be impossible for him to break through his limits and step into the next level. Busy. A terrifying tearing sound rang out. The ancient halberd was like a dragon, capable of tearing apart everything. In that instant, at the instant the ancient halberd erupted forth, a speck of light appeared at the tip of the halberd. This speck of light was akin to astral energy, like a brand new type of energy. I can sense it. Qin Wentian rejoiced in his heart. This was the feeling. He stabbed out with his halberd once more, causing specks of light to appear, causing the tip of the ancient halberd to be faintly discernible. However, the terrifying power contained within the halberd caused it to feel surreal. Qin Wentian suppressed the palpitations in his heart, as he stabbed out with the ancient halberd again and again. Astral light shone resplendently as the ancient halberd shone with an illusory luster. It was as though the halberd was a manifestation of a dream in reality. The fusion of true intents caused the strength of the halberd to undergo a transformation. That's it. This type of energy is able to fuse with the astral energy of the astral constellations, the materialization of true intent. Qin Wentian's heart trembled. Strands of unique astral energy emanated from his body. These strands of astral energy seemed to be infused with true intents, causing his entire body to be shrouded in a layer of illusory luster. Yet at the same time he gave off a feeling of strength. Qin Wentian drew in a deep breath. He had finally peeked through another door. Since this door had been opened, success would naturally follow when the conditions were right. Just like how after he comprehended the first true intent, it was much easier for him to comprehend the subsequent true intents of mandates. A few days later, Qin Wentian's entire body shone with a demonic luster. With a single glance, he gave off an extremely demonic feeling. His handsome eyes and brows seemed to be dyed black, giving off a sense of sharpness. True intent of demonic and true intent of force. Both are proficient in offense. If they can fuse together, the resulting energy would definitely increase explosively. Qin Wentian mused as he continued brandishing his ancient halberd. It was as though he would never feel fatigue, and there would be no end to it. When a strand of incomparably violent light particles appeared, Qin Wentian's eyes flickered with a demonic light. This kind of energy was filled with a violent destructive might. Every single particle of light seemed to contain a power that could destroy everything in its path, as though it was endless. This kind of energy, even if used for defense, would be extremely powerful. Qin Wentian murmured. After which, strands of light enveloped his body, giving him a layer of demonic and dazzling radiance. This kind of energy still contained a demonic aura, but it was even more terrifying than before. For those who haven't comprehended an attack-type true intent, they wouldn't even be able to break through my defense. Qin Wentian murmured. This bit-by-bit improvement caused him to be extremely excited. At his level, it wasn't easy for him to advance by even a tiny bit. It was even more difficult to advance by a few levels. But now that he could fuse his true intent together, there was no doubt that his strength would increase exponentially. Qin Wentian was improving. This meant that Ditian was improving as well. Such improvement caused those experts who thought that Ditian had no hope at all to gradually feel a glimmer of hope. Ditian's improvement was simply too fast. So fast that it caused them to feel fear in their hearts. After living for such a long period of time, a few years or tens of years were nothing more than the blink of an eye. In just a few months, Ditian's strength continued to grow stronger. If he could maintain such a speed, it was unknown if he would be able to step into a level that no one had ever reached before. The master of the Immortal Palace was searching for a successor, trying to find someone who could defeat an immortal at the Heavenly Dipper realm. To them, this was extremely ridiculous. Immortals were extremely proficient in the usage of energy, and their ability to fuse them together. Even if their cultivation bases were suppressed, they would still be able to insta-kill those who claimed to be at the peak of Heavenly Dipper. Defeated? They truly felt that no one could do it. Ditian's improvement was very fast, but to them, it was merely a glimmer of hope. In addition, this might just be one of the tests. But what sort of character was that old thief? It was understandable that he would be so harsh when choosing a successor. It has already been half a year since Qin Wentian entered the Immortal Palace. On this desolate land, no traces of time could be seen. Although Ditian's improvement was very fast, he still had a long way to go. It was unknown where the end was. Qin Wentian prepared to head out. His comprehension had already reached a bottleneck. In the outside world, Qing Cheng and Qing Er might still be worried for him. It was enough for him to leave Ditian in the Immortal Palace. On this desolate land, numerous immortal tombs could be seen. There were many treasures here, as well as tens of thousands of immortal manuals, causing people to feel an intense urge to plunder them. However, Qin Wentian didn't touch them. If Ditian could complete his test, everything here would belong to him. As for now, although Qin Wentian was even more confident in his own strength, he still didn't feel that he could kill a tomb immortal alone. The wind gusted by, staining his white robes with dust. Qin Wentian's silhouette flickered as he sped through the desolate land, heading back the way he came from. He had no idea how those tomb immortals were doing now. He remembered that there was a tomb immortal who blocked their path of retreat. He wondered if he was still alive or not. Fan Miaoyu. At this moment, Qin Wentian saw the silhouette of a female not far away from him. She was in a sorry state and seemed to be fleeing. It was none other than Fan Miaoyu. Qin Wentian turned his gaze to the direction behind Fan Miaoyu. Another silhouette of a female could be seen rushing towards Fan Miaoyu. Behind this female, there was a silhouette with his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes were blank and vacant. It was none other than a tomb immortal. Fan Miaoyu also saw Qin Wentian. Upon seeing Qin Wentian moving towards her, she involuntarily called out, "She is trying to frame me. Don't get near me, walk in another direction." Qin Wentian's countenance turned cold as he stared at the female behind him. It was none other than the female from the Grand Shang faction of the Royal Sacred Sect who mocked him earlier. Evidently, this female was targeted by the tomb immortal, and he intentionally lured her towards Fan Miaoyu. However, this tomb immortal didn't seem to have any intentions of killing her. He casually strolled about. If he truly used his full strength, he would have long since killed her. Quinn. Fan Miaoyu was alone. In front of her, there was another silhouette rushing over. It was none other than Quinn. Don't worry, he shouldn't have any killing intent. Qin Wentian's silhouette had already arrived in front of Fan Miaoyu. Staring at the female rushing over, a cold light flickered in his eyes. The tomb immortal behind her had a flute in his hands, and his steps were extremely carefree. His countenance was exceedingly handsome. It was very possible that he was a romantic immortal in the past. "Let's go." Qin Wentian spoke in a low voice. Fan Miaoyu nodded. The three of them turned, only to see the female following behind them. Qin Wentian abruptly turned as a sharp light flashed in his eyes, piercing the eyes of the female. "If you take one more step, I will kill you." As the sound of his voice faded, his killing intent intensified. The female's steps faltered as she stared at Qin Wentian with trepidation in her eyes. "How dare you?" The countenance of the female was as cold as ice. Qin Wentian stared at her, no longer as low profile as when he was in the royal sacred sect. His eyes were as cold as ice, akin to an unsheathed sword, gleaming with killing intent. However, at this moment, the silhouette of the tomb immortal transformed into a series of afterimages as he sped towards Qin Wentian. His speed was as fast as lightning, and as he pointed out with his flute, a beam of cold light erupted forth. Qin Wentian and Qin both stepped out at the same time, and both of them slashed out with their swords. Qin's sword was like a flying immortal, incomparably carefree, yet contained a terrifying might. Qin Wentian's sword was tyrannical and sharp, containing an incomparably fearsome explosive might. With a thunderous boom, a fissure appeared on the ground. Qin Wentian actually blocked the attack of the tomb immortal. "You guys leave first." Qin Wentian spoke to Qin and Fan Miaoyu. The two of them started, staring at Qin Wentian in bewilderment. "Leave first." Qin spoke to Fan Miaoyu. "No." Fan Miaoyu shook her head, her words causing Qin Wentian to be stunned. And at this moment, a raging wind gusted by as the tomb immortal slowly walked over, exuding an overwhelming killing intent. Qin Wentian stepped out as his bloodline thrummed. His entire person became incomparably demonic as cracking sounds rang out as his robes were torn apart. Astral armor appeared on his body as his body expanded in size. A gigantic blood-colored ancient halberd appeared in his hands as a terrifying light circulated around it, containing a fearsome might within. Water mist appeared, enveloping the tomb immortal as sound waves blasted out. The tomb immortal waved his palms as the water mist was directly sliced apart. The silhouette wielding the long flute stepped out, resembling a beam of killing light as he rushed towards Qin Wentian. The divine energy in Qin Wentian's body gushed forth frenziedly, as strands of mystical energy coiled around the ancient halberd in his hands. Stepping out, the ancient halberd in his hands pierced out, flickering in and out of existence. When the ancient halberd reappeared, it was already directly in front of the buried immortal. An incomparably violent energy erupted forth, colliding head-on with the immortal's attack, causing the earth to split apart. Qin and Fan Miaoyu also rushed over at the same time, only to see Qin's silhouette transforming into a series of afterimages as beams of sword light slashed out from the void. The long flute in the hands of the tomb immortal trembled as an intense light erupted forth. His silhouette arced through the ground as he explosively retreated, instantly widening the distance between him and Qin Wentian. Fusion true intent. Qin Wentian glanced at Qin as a smile appeared on his face. As expected of a heaven chosen of the battle sword sect, Qin's combat prowess was truly shocking. Qin Wentian didn't know that at this moment, Qin's heart was pounding. In just half a year's time, Qin Wentian had actually become so terrifying. As for the female from the Grand Shang faction, she was completely dumbfounded. The three of them joined forces and actually managed to force the tomb immortal to retreat. Not only that, Qin Wentian's attack was a head-on attack. Chapter 641. The buried immortal with the flute in his hands was forced back. His hands were slanted to the side as the raging wind howled. The killing intent radiating from him grew increasingly terrifying. Inclining his head, his eyes flickered with an unexcelled might as he stared at Qin Wentian. Busy. Afterimages appeared. It was impossible to see how fast he was moving. Qin Wentian even closed his eyes as his sword intent abruptly permeated the air. He took a large step forward as a sword imprint appeared in the air. Die. With a wave of his palms, the omnipresent sword might whistled through the air, causing rumbling sounds to echo out unceasingly. It was as though the sword chi was being blocked unceasingly. However, the raging wind grew more and more terrifying, even enveloping Qin Wentian within it. A fearsome violet light flashed within the raging wind, akin to an apocalyptic tempest, as it slashed towards Qin Wentian. Qin, Fan Miaoyu and Fan Miaoyu who were outside trembled involuntarily when they saw this scene. That buried immortal danced in the wind. It was impossible to see where he was. It was as though he was a part of this tempest. What should we do? Fan Miaoyu's countenance was as pale as paper. She stared at Qin with a pleading gaze. At this moment, she felt completely helpless. She truly didn't wish for a character as magnificent as Qin Wentian to die here. But when that buried immortal unleashed his true strength, he was basically an invincible existence to them. Qin Wentian's body gleamed with a terrifying demonic light, resembling a supreme demon king that stood tall on the ground. His astral nova appeared, exuding a fearsome sword might. The surface of the astral nova shimmered with light that seemed capable of slicing through everything. Rumbling sounds rang out as the sword pierced through the air, slashing towards the tempest. The terrifying screeching sound pierced the eardrums of those who heard it. Several cracks appeared on the tempest, but because of the speed at which it revolved, the cracks instantly healed. So strong. To think that the fusion of true meanings can be used in a mystic art to such a frightening extent. Qin Wentian's heart trembled. His 4 Yuanfu roared as his divine energy gushed into his palms. Runic light shone resplendently as the power of his true intent circulated within his palms. With a roar of rage, Qin Wentian rushed out, manifesting numerous demon-like silhouettes that could pluck stars from the sky, suppressing immortals and devils. At this instant, an opening actually appeared in the tempest as Qin Wentian transformed into a great rock, instantly fleeing into the distance. Buzz! The windstorm churned and soared up into the air, sweeping up the sand in its wake as it chased after Qin Wentian with the power to destroy the heavens and earth. Qin Wentian's footsteps were extremely quick as a spatial scroll appeared in his hands. After which, he abruptly activated it, wrapping it around his body as he vanished from his original location, reappearing in the distance. That tempest continued chasing after him, and gradually, it was far away from Qin and Fan Miaoyu's line of sight. He's become so strong. Great waves rocked Fan Miaoyu's heart. She simply had no way to imagine how Qin Wentian managed to accomplish such a leap in strength. Compared to her back then on the sacred battle platform, Qin Wentian wasn't merely a level stronger. Since he can suppress even era-suppressing geniuses, it's not strange for him to become a legend. Qin laughed in a carefree manner. After which, he stepped out and departed in a carefree manner, not bothering to look at Qin Wentian anymore. Since Qin Wentian had the interspatial scroll, he should be able to escape from the pursuit of that buried immortal. Fan Miaoyu glanced at the female, who led the buried immortal towards her as she icily spoke. Do you still remember mocking him back then in the royal sacred sect? How ironic. After speaking, Fan Miaoyu also departed. Although she hated this female for leading the buried immortal to her, Fan Miaoyu didn't have the ability to do anything to her. The female turned ashen as she departed as well. Other than anger, there was also a trace of desolation in her eyes. She was a heavens chosen from the Grand Shang faction. Even after joining the royal sacred sect, she was still extremely dazzling, having comprehended 3 types of true intents and had extraordinary combat prowess. But in this immortal palace, she couldn't find any value in her existence. She was simply too weak. Although the people here were all at the heavenly dipper realm, she could clearly feel how tiny and insignificant she was. Wanting to obtain immortal arts or immortal weapons was undoubtedly the ravings of a lunatic. Now it was time for her to leave. Other than suffering a blow to her confidence, she didn't gain anything else. However, she understood that there would always be a sky beyond a sky. When she arrived at the exit of the immortal palace, she actually saw quite a few people waiting there. She walked up and called out to the 2 people in the lead, Senior Xiaosheng, Senior Zaiqiu. The gazes of everyone turned to her. Xiaosheng asked, "Did you gain anything?" "Nope." The female shook her head. "Buried immortals are simply too powerful. There's no way for us to win against them. This time around our royal sacred sect must have lost many geniuses. Even junior brother Sun Qing." When Sun Qing was mentioned, the countenances of Xiaosheng and Zaiqiu instantly turned incredibly unsightly. Zaiqiu coldly continued, "If it wasn't for the fact that those 2 didn't listen to our orders, how could Sun Qing have died?" "Senior brother, Are you talking about Qin Wentian and Qin? When the female thought of Qin Wentian, hatred flickered in her eyes. This person had a deep grudge with the Granshang faction, but the battle sword faction wouldn't allow him to die unless Xiaosheng and Zaiqiu wanted to deal with him. Not only that, Qin Wentian's strength had improved so rapidly. In the future, he would only grow more and more terrifying. As she thought of this, flames of jealousy burned in her heart. Not long ago, I met the two of them. They met a buried immortal and actually led the buried immortal to me, almost causing me to die. Since they did such a thing to me, I'm sure they would do the same to their fellow sect members as well. The countenances of Zaiqiu and Xiaosheng grew increasingly unsightly. In Zaiqiu's eyes, traces of killing intent could be seen flickering within. He then spoke to the female. Right now there are quite a few buried immortals in this desolate land. It's already impossible for us to join forces to hunt them down. We can only come again if there's an opportunity. As for the other matters, let's talk after we leave this place. Hua Taishu hasn't returned yet. Should we wait a little longer? Someone from the core faction asked. No need. This immortal palace is strange. It's hard to enter, but it's very easy to exit. Xiaosheng shook his head. The others didn't say anything more and all returned, leaving the immortal palace. They knew that after they left, they wouldn't have another chance to enter again. Even if they did, it would be useless. After these people exited, the expert surnamedly sat in meditation outside. He knew that even with such a large group of people, they wouldn't have much of a harvest. He could only sigh and return. If they wanted to conquer this immortal palace, it was unknown how long they would have to wait. This group of people had the same information as those who came before. The strength of the buried immortals was extremely high, and they were invincible at the same level. It was just that this group of people seemed to know some things. There was a high possibility that there was a supreme expert waiting for a successor in this immortal palace. If our royal sacred sect can produce a supreme character and obtain the inheritance of the immortal palace lord, his future achievements would definitely be unprecedented. The expert surnamedly mused as he sighed again. However, he didn't know when such a character would appear. Several days later, the group of people all returned to the royal sacred sect and entered closed-door seclusion. Although they didn't have many harvests during this trip, the strength of many of them had improved greatly. Qin also returned to the battlesword faction of the royal sacred sect. After that, Xiaosheng sent out a summons for those who entered the immortal palace this time around to gather together. There was something they wanted to discuss, and everyone happily departed. Siko and Qin traveled together. On the way, Siko reminded Qin, "Back then you didn't save Sun Qing. He might bear a grudge against you. You have to be more careful this time around. In the territory of the core faction of the royal sacred sect, even if Zaiqiu and Xiaosheng hate me, they can't possibly act against me in front of so many people." Qin smiled and shook his head, appearing as carefree as ever. Although he knew that Sun Qing and Xiaosheng's relationship was extremely good, he did save Fan Miaoyu back then. Who could say that he was in the wrong? The human heart is unfathomable. You are frank and open, but not everyone in the world is as pedantic as you. In any case, if there's anything wrong, just retreat. Siko and Qin had different personalities. In Siko's eyes, Qin was too righteous, just like his sword. Right. Qin smiled and nodded. The two of them continued on their way, and when they met Fan Miaoyu, Qin couldn't help but to smile and greet her. Fan Miaoyu had always been very grateful to Qin. Back then in the immortal palace, Qin saved her life. Not only that, his character was upright, radiant, and his talent was also extremely high. "Senior, has Qin Wentian not returned yet?" Fan Miaoyu smiled as she asked. "Nope, I wonder what good fortune he would encounter in there. But that fellow, there's no need for us to worry about him." Qin laughed. Fan Miaoyu nodded her head, and not long after, they arrived at the location of the core faction of the royal sacred sect. Up ahead, there was a public square with a banquet prepared. Zaiqiu was clad in luxurious robes and stood at the very front. Upon seeing Qin's arrival, his sharp eyes flickered with a cold light. Qin frowned. It was as though he could sense the unfriendliness in Zaiqiu's eyes. But an instant later he relaxed. It was only normal for Zaiqiu to hate him for Sun Qing's death. Qin, do you know your crimes? Qin and the two others just landed on the ground when Zaiqiu's cold voice drifted over. Qin's countenance flickered as he asked, Zaiqiu, what do you mean by this? Senior Uncle Ji once said that everyone in the Immortal Palace has to listen to the commands of Xia Sheng and me. Yet you disobeyed the command. This is the first crime. In the Immortal Palace, we are all disciples of the same sect. Yet you led the buried immortal to your own sect, causing a calamity to befall you. This is the second crime. Both crimes are unforgivable. Zaiqiu's killing intent flashed in his eyes. He didn't feign civility nor did he exchange pleasantries. He directly stated his reasons, using righteousness to suppress Qin. Evidently, the second crime was sufficient to take Qin's life. Qin, let's go. Siko transmitted his voice to Qin. The first crime happened in an emergency. I didn't even have time to think. As for the second crime, it's complete nonsense. Qin coldly replied. Is that so? Junior sister Shang can be my witness. Zaiqiu stared at the maiden from the Grand Shang faction. You are despicable. Fan Miaoyu berated. Clearly, she was the one who did such a despicable thing. Fan Miaoyu, although Qin saved your life, if you continue to distort the truth because of him, don't blame me for being impolite. Zaiqiu icily spoke, his killing intent flashing in his eyes. On what basis should your words be the truth, while I'm distorting the truth? Fan Miaoyu retorted. Because my surname is Zai. A tyrannical aura gushed forth from Zaiqiu. The surname of Zai, the surname of the sacred emperor of the royal sacred sect. Chapter 642. Qin died. His crime was determined by Zaiqiu and he killed him on the spot. The only ones who participated were the peak-level Heavenly Dipper sovereigns from the core faction. Fan Miaoyu stared in horror at the scene before her. She only felt her blood solidifying as her entire body turned cold. Qin's sword was dripping with blood, the blood of an expert from the core faction. He had chopped off the arm of an expert from the core faction, but right now, Zaiqiu's palm was right where his heart should be. His life force instantly withered away. Xia Sheng's fist smashed into his back, shattering his internal organs, and a long spear pierced right through the center of his brows. Fan Miaoyu panted heavily. Never in her wildest dreams would she have imagined that Zaiqiu and the others would actually dare to kill Qin on the spot. The instant he shouted out his surname was Zai, all of them had already acted together, using thunderous methods to surround Qin, not allowing any accidents to happen. Zaiqiu wanted to act first and report later. Only by doing so would he be able to avenge Sun Qing. In truth, Sun Qing's death wasn't what Qin wanted. At that time, he and Qin Wentian could only choose to save one person, and both of them chose Fan Miaoyu. And because they chose to save Fan Miaoyu, there was such a tragic scene before their eyes. One could very well imagine Fan Miaoyu's emotions right now. She had never imagined that the royal sacred sect would be so cruel and cold-blooded. Siko's heart pounded violently as he stared at Qin's death. His eyes turned red as he drew in a deep breath, trying his best to calm his heart. His personality was destined to be able to endure silently. He had always felt that the human heart was unfathomable. Hence when he reminded Qin to be careful earlier, Qin didn't really mind. Siko also thought that Zaiqiu and the others wouldn't be so ruthless, but he had still underestimated Zaiqiu's determination to kill Qin. In fact, Siko was sure that Zaiqiu didn't report this matter to the upper echelons and acted first before reporting. If not, killing a heaven chosen of the battle sword sect wouldn't be permitted by the upper echelons. This was also the reason why Siko felt that Qin's life wouldn't be in danger today. Hence, he didn't forcefully stop Qin. Zaiqiu retracted his palm that was aimed at Qin's heart. Qin's body softly slumped to the ground, lying in a pool of his own blood. A peak-tier Heavenly Dipper chosen of the battlesword sect died just like that, dying with grievance. At this moment, everyone who came to the gathering felt their hearts tremble at Zaiqiu's ruthlessness. The orders of our royal sacred sect are like mountains, everyone has to respect them. Qin disobeyed the orders, and even caused his fellow sect members to be in danger. He's a traitor and shall be killed without mercy. Zaiqiu's cold voice resounded through the silence. causing Fan Miaoyu to feel as though even the wind had turned cold. What a traitor! Kill without mercy. Since he had already made up his mind to kill, all arguments were meaningless. All of this was because his surname was Zai. What happened? A slightly cold voice rang out. Obviously, someone had discovered the situation here, and experts were rushing over. Quinn disobeyed Uncle Master Ji's orders, causing junior brother Sun Qing's tragic death, and then putting junior sister Shang in danger. He should be executed. Zaiqiu spoke. Upon hearing him mentioning Uncle Master Ji, everyone fell silent. Their silhouettes flickered, and not long after, a voice drifted over. Zaiqiu, Elder Ji wants you to head to his palace. The others can disperse first. Yes. Zaiqiu's silhouette flickered as he coldly stared at Quinn's corpse. After which he sped away while mumbling in his heart, "There's still one more." Xiaosheng and the others also departed. Saiku walked up and carried Quinn's corpse before turning and departing the area. Fan Miaoyu followed behind Saiku. This era-suppressing Heaven's Chosen had a dazed expression on her face. Even now, she still couldn't accept that Quinn was killed just like that. Zaiqiu arrived in front of Elderly. Staring at the cold and indifferent eyes of Elderly, Zaiqiu's gaze flickered with a hint of evasiveness. Saiku's guess was correct. Zaiqiu had indeed acted first and reported later. Zaiqiu, you are too ridiculous. Elder Ji berated. Killing a Heaven Chosen of the Battle Sword faction would definitely cause the hearts of the Battle Sword faction to be shaken. Uncle Master, someone has to pay for the death of junior brother Sun Qing. Zaiqiu didn't hide anything in front of Elder Ji. He did it for the sake of Sun Qing. And as for the crime he pinned on Quinn, it was because he wanted to kill Quinn. But to his own Uncle Master, the junior apprentice brother of his master, there was no need for him to fabricate any excuses. So you acted arbitrarily and acted together with Xia Sheng and the others, killing Quinn in public? Elder Ji coldly spoke. Take responsibility? Is there someone else who needs to take responsibility? Yes, there's also Qin Wentian. Zaiqiu continued. This person is even more arrogant and untamed compared to Quinn. Back then he rejected Uncle Master's offer to join our core faction. Since he refuses to submit, I shall kill him. As the sound of the word kill faded, a cold killing intent gushed forth from Zaiqiu. Elder Ji stared at Zaiqiu, causing Zaiqiu to lower his head again. He couldn't see through his Uncle Master's thoughts. He had never been able to. Elder Ji stared at Zaiqiu for a long time before he spoke again. The influence of this matter isn't good. Influence. My royal sacred sect is able to rule over the various factions not because of any benevolence or righteousness, but because we have the strength to suppress everything. If the Battle Sword sect is unhappy, you can just scram out of the royal sacred sect. There will naturally be countless sects in the royal sacred region willing to replace you. Without this protective talisman that is the royal sacred sect, how long can the Battle Sword sect be strong when faced with the hearts of tigers and wolves in the external world? Zaiqiu inclined his head as he spoke. My royal sacred sect, he spoke of, seemed to have excluded all the other factions. In the hearts of these people, the royal sacred sect was the leader of the core faction. Only this core faction was the true royal sacred sect. Elder Ji fell silent for a moment before he sighed and spoke in a low voice. Qin Wentian, what a pity. He is truly a rare Heaven Chosen. I won't participate in this matter. You can go and make the arrangements. Yes, Uncle Master. Zaiqiu felt joy in his heart. Seems like his Uncle Master had tacitly agreed to it. This was the effect of acting first and reporting later. Since things have already happened, there was no way to reverse it. Given his Uncle Master's personality, he would definitely do everything perfectly, leaving no loose ends. After Zaiqiu left, the eyes of Elder Ji flashed with sharpness. Qin Wentian, I've already given you a chance. Since you refused to join my faction, your name shall be erased from the royal sacred region. In front of the Battle Sword Sect's Grand Hall, the crowd stared at Quinn's corpse as sorrow filled their hearts. Quinn. An old man gently stroked Quinn's face, helping him to close his eyes. This old man was none other than Quinn's master. At this moment he seemed to have aged immensely. He was extremely fond of this disciple of his. Quinn's talent was good, his personality was gentle, and he was upright. His swords were like him, he was extremely suitable to cultivate in the way of the sword. However, this outstanding disciple of his had died just like that. Not only that, he died in the hands of someone from the royal sacred sect. Even the leader of the battle sword faction had arrived. In the royal sacred sect, he held the title of vice sect leader. Not only him, the leaders of the other factions all had the title of vice sect leader, and were in charge of their respective factions. But right now, a disciple of his faction was killed in public. This was already equivalent to smacking his face. Old sect leader. Quinn's master stared at the old man. This old man was the previous sect leader of the battlesword sect. These people of the battlesword faction all came from the battlesword sect, hence they were more willing to refer to this old man as the old sect leader. Tell me everything clearly. The old man spoke to Siko. Siko nodded his head and recounted Sun Qing's death. At the same time, Fan Miaoyu also explained the actions of that female surnamed Shang, which Saiqiu used to frame Quinn. After hearing the narration of the two of them, the countenances of the crowd turned even colder. There were even some who wanted to head to the core faction to demand for Quinn. Wentian is in danger. The old man faintly spoke, his words causing the hearts of everyone to tremble. That's right, since Saiqiu dared to kill Quinn in public, he would definitely not spare Qin Wentian. Old sect leader, are you not going to demand for Quinn? Quinn's master's eyes turned red as he asked. Demand? Do you think they will hand Saiqiu over? At this moment, the old man didn't have the same playful attitude he had when he was talking to Qin Wentian. Instead, he was extremely solemn, exuding a powerful imposingness. Could it be that they can do whatever they want and be so rude? Quinn's master raged. In the royal sacred region, the royal sacred sect is the hegemon of this generation, while the core faction is the true core. Why? The old man asked. Because of strength, because of that legendary realm. Quinn's master replied. You should also know that the reason why they can control everything and make us submit to them isn't because of benevolence or righteousness. It's because of strength. What is strength? If there's a day when one of us can reach that legendary realm, we would be able to exist independently, standing on equal footing with the royal sacred sect, recruiting disciples from all over the world to join us. The old man stared at Quinn's master as he solemnly continued. These words aren't treasonous or unfilial, but rather, it's a logic that all the factions know in their hearts. Without that legendary realm, do you think they would care about our faction? In fact, they don't even need to act themselves, they can just order the other factions to suppress us. The other factions would be more than happy to do so, and as for the battlesword sect, they can always support us. After all, there are too many major powers in the royal sacred region. The words of the old man caused everyone to be dumbfounded. If they resisted, they could directly suppress them. Without the battlesword sect, they could support another major power. In this place, the core faction was the absolute hegemon. Fan Miaoyu's entire body turned cold as she trembled. Although they all faintly understood some of this logic, when they heard it from the leader of the battlesword sect, it was like the morning bell ringing in the evening. This was the world of martial arts, cruel and cold. As for benevolence and righteousness, you have to have the strength first before you have the qualifications to talk about it. If not, the strongest martial arts could suppress everything. Everyone seemed to have a deeper understanding of the meaning of the royal sacred sect, the hegemon of the royal sacred region. The royal sacred sect leader actually said this in front of everyone. Wasn't he afraid that this news would leak out? Because this was a logic that everyone understood. If they didn't rebel, the royal sacred sect wouldn't suppress them for no reason. Just because of a single sentence? The experts from the core faction of the royal sacred sect didn't have such leisure time. As for having the intention to rebel, there were countless sects in the royal sacred region who didn't want to replace the royal sacred sect. There were no sects or aristocratic clans who didn't want to, but the prerequisite was that they didn't have someone at that cultivation realm. Was that possible? Chapter 643. Although there were many factions in the royal sacred sect, they didn't interfere too much with each other. Rather than saying that this was a complete sect, it was more like an alliance, mutually dependent on each other. This point was very clear to the various factions. To the core faction, in their eyes, the royal sacred sect only had themselves. The other factions were all vassals. If the royal sacred sect was truly a complete entity, Elderly wouldn't have invited Qin Wentian to join the core faction. In this alliance, the core faction undoubtedly held the leading position. They were the strongest, and the other factions could all be replaced. In the history of the royal sacred sect, there had been many changes. If one was too weak, they would be eliminated from the royal sacred sect, no longer having the qualifications to remain in the sect. As for the royal sacred sect, there would naturally be times when they needed the support of the various factions. However, the old man didn't say too much about this. He also felt pain in his heart over Quinn's death. But if he wanted to rebel, it was impossible for him to do so. He knew that once he did so, to the battle sword faction, it would be a calamity of destruction. Reality was simply so cruel. Zaiqiu killed a heaven chosen of his faction, yet he could only endure it. In addition, the core faction might even be wary of them in the future. With regards to all of this, Qin Wentian had no idea. At this moment, he was on his way back to the sacred royal city. As to why he was late by a few days, it was because he didn't have the guidance of Elderly. Hence, he took a few more days before exiting the illusionary mountain range. That mountain range was boundlessly vast, and the Immortal Palace was located there. It was exceedingly difficult to locate it, but exiting it was much easier. The Immortal Palace was too small, while the outside world was too vast. Qin Wentian's heart was set on returning, hence his speed was extremely fast. Outside one of the city gates of the sacred royal city, a flawlessly beautiful silhouette stood there. Her gaze was staring into the horizons, as though she was waiting for someone to return. Behind this flawlessly beautiful maiden, there were several silhouettes. They were all maidens of the Medicine Sovereign Valley, and their demeanor was extraordinary. Who is the holy maiden of the Medicine Sovereign Valley waiting for? She has already been here for 2 days. Many people felt their hearts trembling. Such a devastatingly beautiful maiden had actually been standing here for 2 days without moving at all. To be able to make the holy maiden wait, other than the top ranker of the immortal martial realm, Qin Wentian, who else could there be? Someone laughed. However, they had no idea why Mo Qingqing was waiting for Qin Wentian here. Right now, a year has already passed since the immortal martial realm, but Qin Wentian's name was still as resounding as ever. On the sacred battle platform, he slew Di Shi, fought against numerous outstanding heroes, and even caused the era-suppressing genius at the 9th level of Heavenly Dipper, Fan Miaoyu, to admit defeat. However, after that battle, the Royal Sacred Sect seemed to have invited Qin Wentian and the other geniuses over. After that, Qin Wentian vanished without a trace. Maybe he went to some secret realms. If I could receive such treatment from the Holy Maiden, I would even be willing to die. Someone sighed. In truth, Mo Qingqing had no other choice but to wait here. If Qin Wentian returned, he should have used this direction to return to the sacred royal city. If she went out now, the area would be too vast. She knew of Quinn's death, and after hearing the entire story, she knew that Qin Wentian might be in danger as well. In that case, she could only wait here personally. If the Royal Sacred Sect directly acted against Qin Wentian, they could only fall out with the Royal Sacred Sect. After waiting for another day, the crowd in the air didn't stop. Mo Qingqing's gaze never shifted away. Not only for her, there were already many spies from the Battle Sword sect in the darkness of this space. Qin and Qin Wentian chose to save Fan Miaoyu but didn't save Sun Qing, causing Qin to be killed by Zaiqiu out of hatred. Qin had already died, and the Battle Sword faction had no way to seek revenge. Zaiqiu's surname was the surname of the Sacred Emperor. His status wasn't merely a disciple of the core faction of the Royal Sacred Sect, he was also a direct descendant of the Sacred Emperor. Anyone with the surname Zai would have an extremely high status in the Royal Sacred Sect, possessing many special privileges. If it wasn't for his surname being Zai, how would Zaiqiu dare to be so impudent, acting first and reporting later? Because he knew that no one could touch him, not even the Battle Sword faction. Unless his Battle Sword faction was willing to bet the fate of the entire Battle Sword faction on the life of Zaiqiu. Not far away from the sacred royal city, Qin Wentian was riding on a flying sword. The sword chi beneath his feet hummed, taking the form of a sword. His white robes fluttered in the wind as he stood with his hands clasped behind his back. That handsome face of his, as well as his spirited eyes, all exuded a carefree aura. After this trip, his combat prowess had already broken through to the peak of Heavenly Dipper. Once upon a time, the Heavenly Dipper realm was an unreachable existence to him. But now he was about to break through to celestial phenomenon. The years of cultivation felt like a dream to him. The majestic and imposing ancient city appeared before his eyes. Qin Wentian's eyes flashed before a radiant smile appeared on his face. Staring at the beautiful silhouette atop the ancient city walls, Qin Wentian felt warmth in his heart. His heart was set on returning to Qin Wentian, but wasn't Qingqing missing him as well? She was actually waiting outside the city for his return. Qingqing. The speed of the sword beneath Qin Wentian's feet grew even faster. He transformed into a beam of light as he descended from the air, instantly appearing in the airspace above the city walls. He stood before Qingqing as a gentle smile could be seen in his eyes. Wentian. Mo Qingqing stepped out, instantly traversing the distance between them as she appeared beside Qin Wentian. She held onto Qin Wentian's hands as she rested her head on Qin Wentian's chest. After which, an intoxicating smile blossomed in her eyes. I'm back. Qin Wentian gently smiled as he tightly held onto Mo Qingqing's hands. This parting had lasted for over half a year, and the two of them were always apart. This caused Qin Wentian to feel guilt in his heart. MHM. Mo Qingqing nodded her head. Let's return to the royal sacred sect first. Qin Wentian smiled. However, when he saw Mo Qingqing's countenance changing, he couldn't help but to ask, what's wrong? Wentian, can you accompany me to the Medicine Sovereign Valley? Mo Qingqing's eyes were like water as she stared at Qin Wentian with a hint of hope in her eyes. Qingqing, what happened exactly? A sense of unease appeared in Qin Wentian's heart, only to see Mo Qingqing lowering her head as she replied. Qin died. He was killed by Zai Qiu and the others from the Royal Sacred Sect. I heard that both you and Qin offended Zai Qiu. Qin, he's dead? Qin Wentian only felt his heart twitching violently as his countenance paled. Killed by Zai Qiu in the Royal Sacred Sect? Although Qin Wentian didn't interact much with Qin, Qin Wentian was extremely fond of Qin's personality. Qin was upright, carefree and uninhibited. He thought that in the future, they would definitely become very good friends. This time around, after returning to the Royal Sacred Sect, he still planned to drink a few cups of wine with Qin. However, Mo Qingqing told him that Qin had died. He died in the hands of Zai Qiu. The joy he felt from returning instantly vanished without a trace. What remained was only a belly full of anger, as well as the coldness in his heart. Qingqing, tell me what happened exactly. Qin Wentian felt a dull pain in his heart. Although his cultivation base was nearing the celestial phenomenon realm, and his state of heart was incomparably tough, he still had no way to calmly watch the people around him die. He couldn't be as calm as still water, he couldn't be as cold and emotionless as before. Mo Qingqing told everything she knew to Qin Wentian, even replicating the words of the old man from the Battle Sword Sect. Qin Wentian clenched his fists tightly after he heard it, as though a blazing flame was burning in his chest. His surname was Zai, the surname of the sacred emperor. So tyrannical, disregarding everything? His surname was Zai, publicly killing a heaven chosen from the Battle Sword Sect? Yet this was a baseless accusation? His surname was Zai, so just because he and Qin chose to save Fan Miaoyu instead of Sun Qing, they wanted to kill him and Qin? His relationship with Fan Miaoyu was closer. In that moment of crisis, he would naturally save her. Yet Sun Qing's death was blamed on him and Qin? How preposterous! Qin Wentian was so angered that his body trembled uncontrollably as a cold killing intent gushed forth uncontrollably from him. After killing Qin, the next target would be him, Qin Wentian? Qingqing, let's return to the Royal Sacred Sect. Qin Wentian spoke, his words causing Mo Qingqing's countenance to stiffen. Qin Wentian then continued. I'm afraid we're already being targeted. In such a situation, if he wanted to kill me, wouldn't it be easier for him to do so on our way back? We might as well head back to the royal sacred sect openly. Emo Qingqing nodded her head, but she was still worried. The two of them turned and soared into the air, only to see Mo Qingqing tightly holding onto Qin Wentian's hand, as though she was afraid of losing him. This scene caused the spectators from afar to feel incomparably envious. What a match made in heaven! At this moment, they still had no idea of the storm Qin Wentian was facing. On the way back to the royal sacred sect, there were people following them in the dark, yet none of them acted. In the royal sacred sect, the location of the battle sword faction, the news of Qin Wentian's return instantly caused a huge commotion. This had nothing to do with Qin Wentian's status. It was because of Qin's death, causing Qin Wentian's identity to be too sensitive. Countless eyes were staring at him, wanting to see what Zaiqiu would do next. Would he accuse Qin Wentian of the same crime as Qin and kill him on the spot? You shouldn't have returned. A voice drifted into Qin Wentian's ears. Qin Wentian could tell that the voice belonged to the battlesword faction's ancestor. As the sound of this voice faded, a group of silhouettes soared over from afar. These were none other than those from the core faction of the royal sacred sect. Qin Wentian. In the air, the person in the lead was none other than Xiaosheng. He stared at Qin Wentian as he spoke. Back then in the secret realm, you disobeyed orders and caused Sun Qing's death. After that, you even trapped a disciple of the royal sacred sect in danger. I order you to come here to lead the core faction, and apologize to junior apprentice Sister Shang. No one is allowed to protect Qin Wentian. If you flee out of fear, kill without mercy. After speaking, Xiaosheng led his people away, leaving behind this sentence. Those from the battlesword faction all inclined their heads as a cold light flickered in their eyes. What a good Zaiqiu. He didn't find any other reasons, nor did he act sneakily. Instead, he acted the same way he dealt with Qin, accusing Qin Wentian of the crime and killing him. If Qin Wentian fled, it would mean that he fled out of fear and would be killed without mercy. This was the most direct method. Killing Qin was the same as killing him. In that case, Qin Wentian naturally had to be killed as well. Using the same baseless crime, who could say anything? As for leaving now, most probably from the moment Qin Wentian stepped into the sacred royal city, it would be extremely difficult for him to leave. Chapter 644. What should they do? At this moment, the battlesword faction was strangely silent. Many gazes were staring at Qin Wentian as expressions of reluctance flickered in their eyes. Should they just give up like this? Should they just watch as Qin Wentian sends himself to death? Qin had already died, and now they were going to lose Qin Wentian, who was a heaven chosen of the royal sacred region? It was impossible for them to rebel. Their faction was still far from having the strength to contend against the core faction of the royal sacred sect. In addition, if the core faction wanted to destroy them, they didn't even need to act personally. They only needed to send the other factions to suppress them. Since they couldn't rebel, Zaiqiu had framed Qin Wentian with a groundless crime. Just like Qin, there was no way for him to defend himself. Also, the core faction had silently approved of Zaiqiu's actions. Everyone was very clear what this meant. They were allowing Qin Wentian to do whatever he wanted. Let's go look for the old sect leader of the battle sword sect. I have something to say to him. Mo Qingqing's beautiful eyes flashed with determination. She pulled Qin Wentian's hand and walked forward, causing Qin Wentian to stare at her in bewilderment. At this moment, the eyes of this maiden before him were filled with determination. Maybe, only for the person she loved the most would she have such a side to her. Her eyes were filled with determination, bravery, and she was willing to disregard everything. When Qin Wentian looked at Mo Qingqing, it was as though all the dark clouds in his heart had dissipated. A smile as gentle as water could be seen in his eyes. The two of them held each other's hands tightly as they arrived at the location where the old man from the battle sword sect was at. Did the core faction of the royal sacred sect invite you before? Did you reject them? The old man directly asked when he saw Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing walking over. Yes, that expert surname Ji invited me to join the core faction. Qin Wentian nodded. The countenance of the old man turned cold. No wonder the core faction silently approved of Zaiqiu's actions. Senior, the royal sacred sect killed Qin and wanted to deal with Qin Wentian. If I can overturn the second crime, would there be any use? Mo Qingqing asked. The eyes of the old man flashed. He stared at Mo Qingqing. Are you referring to soul searching? It's impossible for them to allow us to search the souls of disciples from the Grand Shang Empire. Soul searching is a form of punishment. There's no need to search her soul. I can concoct a type of medicinal pill that would allow her to reveal the truth. In addition, there wouldn't be any side effects. Mo Qingqing spoke. Are you sure? The old man's eyes flashed with sharpness. Mo Qingqing nodded. If you can really make her speak the truth, then Qin's death would be considered a wrongful death. If they use this as a reason to kill Qin Wentian, the crime would no longer be established. Unless Zaiqiu stubbornly insists on killing Qin Wentian based on the first crime. If he really doesn't care about his reputation being tarnished, there would still be no solution, the old man said. In that case, let's blow this matter up and let everyone in the world know about it. Leave this matter to me. It wouldn't be good for the Battle Sword faction to step in. Mo Qingqing spoke. She knew that although the Battle Sword sect hated Qin Wentian, they had no way to break out of this situation. They were also in agony and sullen, but sadly, their strength was inferior to Qin Wentian's. Right. The old man cast a deep glance at Mo Qingqing before he smiled at Qin Wentian. You bastard, you are truly a blessed man. Regardless of the young woman in front of him or that last Qing. Both of them were equally lovable. Today, Qin Wentian and the old man chatted for a long time. On the second day, the ancient sacred royal city was in an uproar. All the ins and ins in the city were discussing a single matter. Zaiqiu, the direct descendant of the core faction of the royal sacred sect, was extremely cruel and merciless. For his own selfish reasons he killed Qin, a heavens chosen of the battle sword faction. And now, his long saber was placed on Qin Wentian's neck, wanting to kill this supreme heaven chosen of the royal sacred region. For a period of time, the entire sacred royal city was in an uproar. Everyone on the streets and alleys were discussing this matter. What sort of character was Qin Wentian? After the immortal martial realm as well as the battle on the sacred battle platform, there were only a handful of people in the sacred royal city who hadn't heard of his name. And just when everyone thought that this supreme heaven chosen would bring along an incomparably dazzling radiance to join the royal sacred sect, such a heaven-shaking news was released. How could the hearts of the people not tremble? Not only that, there was also the insider news that caused the hearts of many to tremble. It was rumored that Zaiqiu was a direct descendant of the sacred emperor, the true controller of the royal sacred sect. The reason why he killed Qin and Qin Wentian was because after the sacred battle platform, the royal sacred sect had invited the geniuses of the various powers to a secret realm. Within the secret realm, because Fan Miaoyu and one of Zaiqiu's junior apprentice brothers, Sun Qing, were in danger, Qin and Qin Wentian chose to save Fan Miaoyu instead of Sun Qing. The second reason was that Zaiqiu accused Qin and Qin Wentian of causing danger to a disciple of the royal sacred sect, and the witness was a female from the Grand Shang faction. However, who didn't know of the grudge between Qin Wentian and the Grand Shang faction? How credible was this evidence? What was even more shocking was that there was an insider news circulating in the sacred royal city. Zaiqiu's real motive for killing Qin Wentian was the command of the upper echelons of the royal sacred sect. This was because Qin Wentian was from the battle sword sect, and was highly regarded by the battle sword faction. However, the core faction actually invited Qin Wentian to join them. Qin Wentian felt the battle sword sect's courtesy and rejected the invitation. Hence, he was hated by the core faction. The core faction of the royal sacred sect, the hegemon of the royal sacred region, actually didn't have the magnanimity to tolerate others. They wanted to be ruthless and tyrannical, wantonly slaughtering the members of the other factions in their sect. Such news was extremely explosive. The speed at which it circulated was extremely fast. There was basically no way to stop it. Not only that, this news was also rapidly spreading to the outside of the sacred royal city. The hearts of the people in the royal sacred region were filled with panic. Many geniuses felt a wave of sorrow in their hearts. the hegemon of the royal sacred region for countless years, the royal sacred sect, was actually acting tyrannically now. Those who submit to them will prosper. Those who oppose them will die? If the rumors were true, the royal sacred sect was truly too disappointing. In the future, would they still dare to join the royal sacred sect? One must know that the battle sword faction was also a subordinate power of the royal sacred sect. They didn't even want to spare geniuses like Qin and Qin Wentian. Many felt injustice for Qin, but they also felt sorrow for Qin Wentian, hoping that he would be able to escape this calamity. On the third day, another shocking piece of news circulated out. Qin Wentian had severed all ties with the royal sacred sect, officially announcing that he would leave the battle sword sect. In this case, he was no longer a disciple of the battle sword sect, and no longer belonged to the battle sword faction. He had no more ties with the royal sacred sect, and was no longer a subordinate power of the royal sacred sect. This news once again caused the hearts of everyone to tremble. This Qin Wentian was truly resolute, decisively severing all ties with the royal sacred sect. Since you are so heartless, why should I still look up to you? As for leaving the battle sword sect, the crowd guessed that there was another meaning behind it. In the future, if an intense conflict erupted between Qin Wentian and the royal sacred sect, it would have nothing to do with the battle sword sect. Nobody knew if this was suggested by the battle sword sect or by Qin Wentian. But in truth, this was the result of a long discussion between the old man and Qin Wentian. This wasn't the end yet. Not long after Qin Wentian announced that he would leave the battle sword sect, there was news that Xiqiu of the royal sacred sect wanted to head to the battle sword faction to capture Qin Wentian, wanting to directly control Qin Wentian. In the end, he was obstructed, and the person who obstructed him wasn't a disciple of the battle sword faction, but was instead someone from the Medicine Sovereign Valley. There were 7 doyens under the Medicine Sovereign from the Medicine Sovereign Valley, who personally came to announce the engagement between Qin Wentian and the holy maiden Mo Qingcheng. If the royal sacred sect didn't give an explanation and dared to capture Qin Wentian, the Medicine Sovereign Valley would use all their strength to obstruct them. Not only that, they would also sever all ties with the royal sacred sect for medicinal pills. The continuous unforeseen events caused the entire sacred royal city to tremble. During these few days, news regarding the royal sacred sect, the Medicine Sovereign Valley, and Qin Wentian filled the entire sacred royal city. The majority of the topics of discussion were all related to this matter. The unyielding attitude of the Medicine Sovereign Valley caused everyone to sigh in admiration. Even at this moment, they still had such resolution. Clearly, they didn't want to give the royal sacred sect any face. However, everyone was also sighing in admiration at the relationship between the holy maiden Mo Qingcheng and Qin Wentian. At this moment, the two of them were actually engaged. Such an attitude from the Medicine Sovereign Valley naturally had something to do with Mo Qingcheng. Such a relationship of life and death where they could only depend on each other became a legendary story, causing everyone to sigh in admiration that the two of them were simply a match made in heaven, an immortal couple. Countless young lovers were filled with envy, using the two of them as role models. This matter had yet to be settled. The human emperor of Yi Qingyan, actually doubted the royal sacred sect's reasoning for convicting his foster son, Qin Wentian. This caused everyone to sigh in admiration that Yi Qingyan was truly a man of emotions. It was rumored that back then Qin Wentian and Mo Qingcheng had helped him. Hence he accepted Qin Wentian as his foster son. Now that Qin Wentian was in dire straits, he actually stood up for him. As expected of a human emperor of a generation, the public opinion of the royal sacred sect blotted out the skies and covered the earth. And the majority of it was filled with questions and curses. For a period of time, the hegemon of the royal sacred sect was under immense pressure. Xiqiu felt as though he was suffocating. He didn't expect the commotion to be so great. A single Qin Wentian actually caused such a commotion, causing the entire royal sacred region to be in an uproar. Although Qin Wentian was a supreme heaven chosen, his influence wasn't that exaggerated. It was only because the insider news was too shocking that the royal sacred sect, the sacred ground in the hearts of everyone in the royal sacred region, was implicated. This caused the attention of everyone in the world. And in addition to the involvement of the Medicine Sovereign Valley, this caused the entire Royal Sacred Region to explode. The Royal Sacred Sect was a place where geniuses of the Royal Sacred Region gathered. If this was really the case, where would the geniuses of the Royal Sacred Region go to in the future? Was there still a need for them to join the Royal Sacred Sect? Wouldn't they also become the vassals of the Zai faction? Those who submit will prosper, those who defy will die. Finally, Qin Wentian sent out a piece of news. Since Zaiqiu wanted to convict him, he would meet Zaiqiu a day later and head to the Royal Sacred Region to confront Zaiqiu. This news caused the hearts of many to be stirred. Would Zaiqiu really compromise because of the commotion caused by the public opinion? The Royal Sacred Sect was the ruler of an entire region and had the strength to suppress the entire world. Would they disregard everything and directly kill Qin Wentian? Countless gazes in the sacred royal city were staring at the Royal Sacred Sect, wanting to see the ending of this matter. Chapter 645. The upper echelons of the Royal Sacred Sect were also alerted. As experts of the Royal Sacred Sect, they didn't pay attention to the internal affairs of the sect every day. In truth, not many people knew of Zaiqiu's actions. If back then Zaiqiu had reported to the Royal Sacred Sect before acting against Qin Wentian and Qin, his elders might not have agreed to him using such a drastic method. Zaiqiu also knew this point. Hence he chose to act first and report later, using the most direct and violent method to kill Qin, causing the situation to be irreversible. At this moment, only now did Zaiqiu's actions were known by others. Zaiqiu was summoned by that expert surnamed Li for a chat. Since things had already been done, how could that expert surnamed Li admit that Zaiqiu had wrongly killed Qin and hand him over? In addition to the fact that Qin Wentian had once rejected him, he allowed Zaiqiu to handle this matter. Since that expert surnamed Li had already made his decision, the others who knew of this naturally wouldn't interfere. However, nobody would have thought that there would actually be someone who would dare to create such a huge commotion, to the extent where everyone in the world knew of it. Evidently, this was done by someone from the Medicine Sovereign Valley. The Medicine Sovereign Valley truly had the guts to do so. They were already standing in opposition to the Royal Sacred Sect. Right now, the upper echelons of the Royal Sacred Sect were all alerted, summoning Zaiqiu several times for a chat, causing Zaiqiu to feel extremely pressured. The Royal Sacred Sect ruled the world, relying on their strength to suppress the world. Everyone in the world worshipped them as a sacred ground, with countless geniuses entering it. But if the rumors were true, that the Royal Sacred Sect had wrongly killed Qin and Qin Wentian, that would be a huge scandal. Although nobody could do anything to them, they couldn't help but to consider the repercussions of this matter. Finally, the upper echelons of the Royal Sacred Sect came to an agreement. Their punishment for Qin Wentian was death. But the prerequisite was that they had to prove Qin Wentian's crimes. Qin Wentian and Qin caused a disciple of the Royal Sacred Sect to fall into a dangerous situation, resisting the orders of the Royal Sacred Sect. No matter what Qin Wentian was, no matter what talent he had, they had to kill him without mercy. This was how the Royal Sacred Sect should be. This was the consensus of the core faction of the Royal Sacred Sect. This caused Zaiqiu, who was under immense pressure, to finally heave a sigh of relief. During these few days, he was almost suffocated. Luckily, since the core faction had made their decision, they could finally kill Qin Wentian openly and honorably, taking revenge for his junior brother Sun Qing. Today, at the place where Qin died, Sun Qing, Xia Sheng and the others gathered. There weren't many of them, and only a few celestial phenomenon ascendants could be seen. However, it was unknown how many experts there were in the surroundings of this space. Not far away in the air, a group of silhouettes could be seen walking over. Indeed, there weren't any members of the Battle Sword faction, not a single one at all. It was as though the Battle Sword faction had completely separated themselves from this matter, not participating at all. Other than Qin Wentian and Mo Qingcheng, the others were all from the Medicine Sovereign Valley. Qin Wentian, do you know your crimes? Zaiqiu stared at Qin Wentian as he icily spoke. What crimes? Qin Wentian landed on the ground as he stared at Zaiqiu. His ice-cold eyes flickered with a terrifying light, as though it contained an intense killing intent. Qin was killed unjustly by Zaiqiu. Before we entered the secret realm, did Senior Ji say that once we entered, we have to listen to Senior Xiaosheng's commands? If there's no Senior Xiaosheng, we have to listen to my commands. Zaiqiu icily asked. Yes. Qin Wentian nodded. I told you to save Sun Qing. Yet you disobeyed my orders and refused to admit your crimes? Zaiqiu asked. Think carefully about the situation back then. You only shouted a single sentence to Qin. Qin, save Sun Qing. You didn't give me any orders, and in that moment of crisis, my actions were all instincts. Zaiqiu, you wanted to kill me, yet you are lying with your eyes wide open. Why don't you just act directly? You can even slander me by saying that I wanted to kill you. Qin Wentian coldly spoke, his words causing Zaiqiu to stiffen. He could faintly remember that at that time, he indeed only shouted a single sentence to Qin, telling him to save Sun Qing, and not Qin Wentian. In that case, Qin Wentian couldn't be considered to have disobeyed his orders. However, the second crime was sufficient to kill Qin Wentian and Qin. What a glib tongue. In that case, you and Qin lured the person in the tomb to Junior Sister Shang, trapping the disciples of my royal sacred sect. Junior Sister Shang is right here. What else do you have to say? Zaiqiu coldly spoke. Is that so? Is what she said true? If she says that the deaths of those who died in the secret realm were all caused by me, wouldn't that be easier? Qin Wentian faintly spoke. After which, he turned his cold gaze onto the female surnamed Shang as he coldly spoke. Shangli, you framed Fan Miaoyu and now you are trying to frame me and Qin. You have to be responsible for Qin's death as well. Impudent. A cold voice rang out, only to see an expert beside Zaiqiu coldly speaking. Qin Wentian, your actions are too despicable. Now you actually still dare to slander Shangli? If you want to say that you didn't do it, you can come over here. I naturally have a way to make you speak the truth. If I wrongly accused you, my royal sacred sect will definitely give you an explanation. Qin Wentian abruptly laughed when he heard the righteous words of the other party. Arrogance was written all over his face as he continued. What a great joke. If I was controlled by you, given the status of the hegemon of the royal sacred sect, wouldn't it be extremely easy for you to trap me in an illusion? But this time around, before the truth could be ascertained, Qin was already killed by Zaiqiu and the others. Yet, Zaiqiu is still standing here in perfect condition, accusing me of my crime. And now you say that you will give me an explanation? What a joke. Let me ask you all, why was Fan Miaoyu brought away? How would I know about Fan Miaoyu's matter? That person coldly snorted. If you refuse to admit it even if you die, there's nothing we can do. But today you have to stay behind no matter what. We will deal with you after the truth is ascertained. Ridiculous to the extreme. At this moment, a voice rang out. After which, Mo Qingqing slowly walked forward with a medicinal pill in her hands. She stared at the experts of the royal sacred sect as she spoke. There's no need to wait for the truth to be ascertained. This medicinal pill is none other than the bewildering pill. For those who consume it, within the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, they will answer truthfully no matter what you ask them. As long as you feed this pill to Shangli, the truth will be revealed. Do you all dare? Cold light flashed in Mo Qingqing's eyes, causing the hearts of the experts of the royal sacred sect to tremble. That beautiful eyes of hers actually gleamed with a sharpness akin to the edge of a blade, staring straight at them with no fear at all. What a joke. Who knows what the true effect of this pill is? If you guys tampered with it, wouldn't Shangli say whatever you want her to say? Zaiqiu coldly spoke. Zaiqiu, why is there such a stupid member of the clan? Mo Qingqing stared at Zaiqiu, her cold voice causing Zaiqiu's countenance to instantly turn incomparably unsightly to behold as killing intent gushed forth from him. After she consumes the pill, there's no need for us to question her. Isn't it enough for you guys to question her? If you still suspect that there's a problem with the pill, the royal sacred sect is the hegemon of this world, and they have many powerful alchemists. It's extremely easy for them to take the pill and appraise it. If there's a problem with the pill, I, Mo Qingqing, can use my life to pay for it. Mo Qingqing's voice was filled with determination as she continued. If the royal sacred sect doesn't wish for Shangli to consume the pill, There's no need for you guys to waste any more time talking nonsense. If you want to kill her, just do it. There's no need for you guys to make things worse. The royal sacred sect is truly a laughing stock. As the sound of her voice faded, the entire space fell silent. Mo Qingqing's words were irrefutable. If she suspected that there was a problem with the pill, she would use her life to pay for it. Not only that, the royal sacred sect did indeed have powerful alchemists. Too impudent. When did the matters of my royal sacred sect become something that, alas, like you can interfere in? What a joke. An old man berated, his words causing the entire space to tremble. A stifling pressure gushed forth, enveloping Mo Qingqing. Under this terrifying pressure, Mo Qingqing found it hard to even breathe. Qin Wentian stepped out, standing shoulder to shoulder with Mo Qingqing. At this moment, Mo Qingqing's countenance was filled with determination. There was no fear in her eyes. Her back was still straight as she stared at the old man. In this vast world, the royal sacred region governs the 9 great sects, Grand Shang and Grand Zhou, gathering all the heroes of the world here. Although they didn't truly govern the world in truth, they have already grasped the authority of the world. If they want to kill someone, no one can stop them. Today, with just a single command, they would be able to cause our blood to splatter 5 steps away from them, announcing this to the world. After that, they would use iron-blooded methods to suppress those who dare to criticize the royal sacred sect. All these, the royal sacred sect has already accomplished. This is why Zaiqiu is so arrogant. It's just that the royal sacred sect has today's prosperity, ruling over an entire region for countless years, being revered as a sacred ground by the entire world. What did they depend on to suppress the entire world? Generation after generation of geniuses came here to join the royal sacred sect. What you guys did today might not be sufficient to shake the foundation of the royal sacred sect, but if the entire world is divided, 10 years later, 100 years later, or even 1,000 years later, I wonder if the royal sacred sect would still be able to stand tall, unshakable. Mo Qingqing's voice rang out. Her long black hair fluttered in the wind. A single sentence from her actually caused the experts of the royal sacred sect to be dumbfounded. They stared dumbfoundedly at the supreme beauty before them. It was very hard to imagine that Mo Qingqing would actually be able to say such words. Well said, as expected of the disciple of this seat. The bewilderment pill was concocted by this seat. Who in the entire royal sacred region would dare to doubt it? If you guys don't dare to let that maiden consume it, in that case, don't even think of saying that you are guilty. Qin Wentian is already engaged to my disciple, Mo Qingqing. If the royal sacred sect dares to kill him, this seat's temper wouldn't be so good either. An ethereal voice drifted over from the sky, unfathomable and untraceable. Within the royal sacred sect, numerous tyrannical auras soared up into the skies, wanting to find the location of the person who spoke. Since everyone has already arrived at my royal sacred sect, why is there still a need to hide? A voice rang out from within the royal sacred sect. As the sound of his voice faded, the silhouettes of 2 old men appeared not far away from Mo Qingqing. They were none other than the 2 old men who had appeared outside the immortal martial realm back then. Other than them, there was another group of silhouettes walking over from another direction. These people were all clad in white, exuding an aura that caused the gazes of many to freeze. These people were actually envoys of the immortal martial realm. Qin Wentian, if the royal sacred sect doesn't welcome you, the great gates of the immortal martial realm are still wide open for you. One of the envoys from the immortal martial realm spoke. Qin Wentian stared at that person. It was actually none other than the realm lord of the immortal martial realm, Wu Mu. Chapter 646. The recruitment of the immortal martial realm wasn't a secret to the royal sacred sect. The upper echelons of the royal sacred sect all knew about it, and even their sect leader had tacitly acknowledged the existence of the immortal martial realm. However, today, the immortal martial realm actually came to the royal sacred sect and issued an invitation to the person they wanted to deal with, Qin Wentian. This undoubtedly caused the royal sacred sect to be in an extremely difficult position. Numerous silhouettes descended. All of them were experts of the royal sacred sect. The aura radiating from them was extremely terrifying, causing people to feel a sense of stifling pressure. Since when did the matters of my royal sacred sect need to trouble you guys to interfere? A figure walked out. It was none other than the expert surnamed Li. His eyes were sharp as he swept his gaze over the crowd. He didn't expect that there would be so many experts appearing at his royal sacred sect today. Matters of your royal sacred sect? Qin Wentian has already withdrawn from the Battle Sword sect. He has no connection with the royal sacred sect. Not only that, he is now the son-in-law of the Medicine Sovereign Valley. You guys pinned a groundless crime on him, and even threatened to kill him. Do you think I should interfere? The Medicine Sovereign's beard fluttered in the wind as he stared at the expert surnamed Li. As long as Qin Wentian nods his head, this matter would no longer be a matter of your royal sacred sect, but a matter of my immortal martial realm instead. Wu Mu laughed. His meaning was clear without words. As long as Qin Wentian nods his head, he would be someone of the immortal martial realm, and the immortal martial realm would directly interfere in this matter. At that time, even the royal sacred sect wouldn't be able to hold him back. Don't agree to this fellow first. He wants to profit from our misfortune? Ridiculous. The Medicine Sovereign transmitted his voice to Qin Wentian, his words causing Qin Wentian to be taken aback. Looking at the Medicine Sovereign's attitude, he seemed to be extremely confident. The most mysterious expert in the royal sacred region, the Medicine Sovereign from the Medicine Sovereign Valley, the #1 alchemist in the royal sacred region, most probably had a secret that no one knew of. It was rumored that the Medicine Sovereign had lived for countless years, and every time he was about to die of old age, he would suddenly come back to life. What do you guys want? That expert surnamed Li coldly asked. Such a thing had never happened before in his royal sacred sect. Killing a junior at the Heavenly Dipper realm actually caused such a huge commotion. Not only did the entire world know about it, the Medicine Sovereign and experts from the immortal martial realm came to protect him. What does your royal sacred sect want? The Medicine Sovereign blew on his beard as he coldly spoke. Elder Li's expression flickered with uncertainty. Today's events had already exceeded the scope of his control. It was likely that even he wouldn't be able to do anything about it. To him, the Medicine Sovereign was a senior. When he was very young, the Medicine Sovereign was already the Medicine Sovereign. As for the immortal martial realm, Qin Wentian faintly knew that this was also a terrifying power that came to the royal sacred region to plunder demon-level geniuses once every 10 years. Because the number of people they wanted wasn't too many, and it was all voluntary, the royal sacred sect had never interfered. But the true reason was most probably the power behind the immortal martial realm. The royal sacred sect didn't dare to act recklessly. Old fellow, how many years has it been? Your temper is still the same. At this moment, a transcendent aura drifted over from the depths of the royal sacred sect. At this instant, the entire royal sacred sect fell into silence. Everyone stared in that direction as a hint of worship could be seen in their eyes. The sect leader of the royal sacred sect? Qin Wentian inclined his head and stared at the horizons. That aura was calm and tranquil, as though it had already transcended the mortal world. Even the sect leader referred to the Medicine Sovereign as an old fellow. How old is this Medicine Sovereign exactly? Many people sighed in their hearts. Don't be frightened. Maybe it's just a strand of immortal sense. His true self isn't even in the royal sacred sect. The voice of the Medicine Sovereign rang out in Qin Wentian's mind once more, causing Qin Wentian to be stunned. What sort of character was the sect leader of the royal sacred sect? He was a legendary immortal. How could his true self stay in the sect every day? Maybe he wasn't even in the royal sacred region. Hee, even your descendants dare to be so arrogant in front of me. The Medicine Sovereign spoke with a smile that was not a smile. Flaunting your seniority. That voice rang out again. After which, it turned to Wu Mu. Wu Mu, seems like you are the realm lord of the immortal martial realm this time around. Coming from my royal sacred region, and having such accomplishments, you might even be able to reach my level in the future. Congratulations. Many thanks for senior's teachings. Wu Mu respectfully replied, bowing slightly in the direction of a junior. In front of the Medicine Sovereign, he was naturally a junior. Although Wu Mu was respectful, In his eyes, he didn't have the same reverence as the others. Most probably, Wu Mu had met some immortals in the outside world before. There was no doubt that the power behind the immortal martial realm had immortals among them. Medicine Sovereign, Wu Mu, the two of you don't need to mingle with these juniors. I can't be bothered with such matters. Let's just follow the rules of the royal sacred region. Celestial phenomenon ascendants are not allowed to interfere in the matters of juniors at the Heavenly Dipper realm. They can settle it themselves. Do you all hear me? That voice abruptly exuded a sense of imposingness, causing the hearts of everyone to tremble. As expected of the Sacred Emperor. To the Sacred Emperor, such matters were basically nothing. The Sacred Emperor was already an immortal, transcending this level. Even in the Royal Sacred Sect, it has been a long time since he last appeared. Who would have thought that he would actually appear here today? Seems like the face of this medicine sovereign, and Wu Mu was truly too great. Yes, Sacred Emperor. The experts of the Royal Sacred Sect all bowed. Nobody dared to refute the words of the Sacred Emperor. This was the absolute faith of the Royal Sacred Sect. His words were akin to a decree. Since celestial phenomenon ascendants didn't interfere, that meant that Zai Qiu, Xia Sheng and Qin Wentian could settle this themselves. A cold light flashed in Zai Qiu's eyes. He stared at Qin Wentian as though he was looking at a dead man. Since the Sacred Emperor has spoken, no one in the world would dare to disobey. Although this was already giving face to the Medicine Sovereign and the immortal martial realm. If celestial phenomenon ascendants didn't interfere, what could Qin Wentian use to fight against them? Although Qin Wentian was extremely famous in the Royal Sacred Region, in terms of combat prowess, he alone didn't have to fear Qin Wentian in the slightest. He would settle it himself. There was no suspense in killing Qin Wentian. The Sacred Emperor is indeed the Sacred Emperor, transcending worldly affairs. His words clearly displayed his boldness, yet it wouldn't change the ending. Zai Qiu mused. Although his surname was Zai, he was a descendant of the Sacred Emperor, who was separated by many generations. In fact, he had never even seen the Sacred Emperor himself before. The Sacred Emperor had long transcended the mortal world of the Royal Sacred Region. When he was ruling over the world, he pursued the pinnacle of the martial Tao and had extremely strict requirements for his descendants. This was the reason why he was able to rule over the entire Royal Sacred Region. He, Zai Qiu, was a descendant of the Sacred Emperor. If he lost to Qin Wentian, it would be akin to throwing away the face of the Sacred Emperor. Even if he died in battle, the Sacred Emperor wouldn't feel the slightest bit of pity, and would only think that he was useless. The Medicine Sovereign and the Realm Lord of the immortal martial realm furrowed their brows as they glanced at Qin Wentian. If neither of them interfered, although Qin Wentian's talent was outstanding, when compared to the peak-level Heavenly Dipper sovereigns of the Royal Sacred Sect, his foundation was still a little lacking. Mo Qingcheng held onto Qin Wentian's hand as she cast a worried glance at Qin Wentian. The words of the Sacred Emperor seemed to be disadvantageous to Qin Wentian. However, at this moment, Qin Wentian turned his gaze towards the horizons as he calmly spoke. The Sacred Emperor commands the entire world. His words are the law. Since he wants us to settle this ourselves, Junior will naturally comply. In that case, today, there's no right or wrong, there's only gratitude and grudges. Right or wrong, it's in your heart. A calm voice drifted over. A single sentence of right or wrong, it's in your heart. Was Zai Qiu wrong? His junior apprentice brother Sun Qing died, because Qin and Qin Wentian didn't save him. Hence, he bore hatred in his heart, acting first and reporting later. In his heart he was always right. Even if everyone said he was wrong, he would still feel that he was right. But to Qin Wentian, why would he sacrifice Fan Miaoyu to save Sun Qing? There's no right or wrong, there's only gratitude and grudges. Qin Wentian didn't look at Zai Qiu. His gaze was fixed on Shang Li, a disciple from the Grand Shang faction. She had to be responsible for Qin's death. Although I have grudges with the Grand Shang faction, Shang Tong tried to kill me back then, and I killed him with my own strength. If you all hate me, you can kill me openly. However, from the moment I stepped into the Royal Sacred Sect, you already wanted to humiliate me. In the secret realm, you led the danger to Fan Miaoyu and even slandered Qin and me, causing Qin to die. If you don't die, Qin won't be able to rest in peace. Qin Wentian slowly walked out as a long halberd appeared in his hands. Wielding it diagonally, Qin Wentian slowly walked toward Shangli. At this moment, Shangli stared at the cold eyes of Qin Wentian as her heart involuntarily trembled. Among these people, the only one who had seen Qin Wentian's true strength was none other than her, Shangli. She had personally witnessed the battle between Qin Wentian and the buried immortal. Not only that, under the pursuit of the buried immortal, Qin Wentian still managed to walk out of the immortal palace alive. Didn't you mock me before? In that case, scram the hell out. Qin Wentian pointed his long halberd forward, displaying his sharpness. Shangli felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced to her left and right only to see Zaiqiu staring at her as he spoke. Go on. Since he refuses to admit his guilt, our royal sacred sect won't use force to suppress him. Shangli, go and kill him. Shangli didn't tell Zaiqiu about the battle between Qin Wentian and the buried immortal. She lied to Zaiqiu and the others, saying that Qin Wentian and Qin had lured the buried immortal to her. Naturally, she would hide some things from them. No. Shangli shook her head, her countenance incredibly ugly to behold. As the sound of her voice faded, numerous cold gazes landed on her. These were all experts from the royal sacred sect. Cowardice. As someone from their royal sacred sect, Shangli actually cowered from battle when facing Qin Wentian? Today, the sacred emperor was personally spectating the battle. Even if Shangli had to die in battle, she couldn't be cowardly. Shangli, an elder from the Grand Shang Empire, coldly spoke, causing Shangli's countenance to turn even paler. Shangli, Qin Wentian called out. Shangli stared into his eyes only to hear Qin Wentian staring at her as he coldly spoke. For a despicable and useless character like you to continue living, it's only a humiliation. As the sound of his voice faded, Shangli only saw Qin Wentian rushing towards her as his long halberd pierced out. This halberd seemed to be able to penetrate through everything. Shangli unleashed her aura, wanting to defend, yet she discovered that the long halberd had already pierced through her heart. She lowered her head, staring at the long halberd that had pierced through her heart as an expression of agony appeared on her face. Kneel! A thunderous roar rang out. Shangli only felt a terrifying pressure pressing down on her heart. Shangli knelt down, her countenance like dead ashes. The hearts of the spectators all trembled when they saw the kneeling Shangli. The true intent of dreamscape, Shangli had sunk into a dreamscape. There was no halberd piercing through her heart. Qin Wentian was still standing at his original location, yet with a single shout he wanted Shangli to kneel. This scene caused the countenances of those from the royal sacred sect to turn incredibly ugly to behold. Even Zaiqiu had an expression of shame and anger on his face, as he stared at Shangli with killing intent in his eyes. Useless, truly useless. She was already cowering before the battle, her will wasn't firm enough, and she was invaded by Qin Wentian's true intent of dreamscape, unable to extricate herself. This time around, Qin Wentian really moved. Shangli's heart pounded violently as a hint of clarity returned to her eyes. However, it was already too late. Qin Wentian's long halberd directly pierced through the center of her brows. Those from the royal sacred sect didn't interfere. Who would dare to defy the orders of the sacred emperor? Not only that, Shangli's performance truly disappointed them. She was too useless. Chapter 647. Shangli's strength shouldn't be so weak. No matter what, she was a peak-level Heavenly Dipper sovereign who had comprehended 3 types of true intents. There was no way she would be killed in a single strike. However, because Shangli had witnessed the battle between Qin Wentian and the buried immortal, when Qin Wentian wanted to kill her, no one from the royal sacred sect tried to stop her, forcing her to fight. She didn't have any confidence in this battle. She knew she would definitely die if she fought. Under the fear of death, one's will would weaken, and it would be easy for others to invade her mind. At this moment, Qin Wentian used the true intent of dreams, directly dragging her into a dreamscape, killing her in a single strike. Shangli's death didn't cause those from the royal sacred sect to realize Qin Wentian's strength. They only silently cursed Shangli for throwing away the face of the royal sacred sect. The sacred emperor was personally spectating the battle. Yet she first cowered and couldn't even withstand a single strike. She deserved to die. Trash. Zaiqiu coldly glanced at Shangli. Shangli was a heaven chosen from the Grand Shang faction, and not from the core faction. As expected, she couldn't even withstand a single strike from Qin Wentian. How shameful. The countenances of those from the Grand Shang faction were all extremely unsightly. Shangli's death actually had no sympathy or pity, only contempt and mockery. How lamentable. Qin Wentian turned and brandished his halberd as he walked towards the center of the crowd. He didn't say anything, but the killing intent radiating from him was more powerful than any words he could say. Fight. There was only one word written on Qin Wentian's entire body: fight. Qin, a heaven chosen from the battlesword faction, was extremely carefree and unrestrained. He was surrounded here, and killed by the royal sacred sect. This debt of blood had to be repaid by someone. In addition, if it wasn't for the medicine sovereign and realm lord Wu Mu appearing today, the immortal sense of the sacred emperor of the royal sacred sect wouldn't have appeared at all. These experts from the royal sacred sect would have directly used their strength to bully Qin Wentian, just like how they dealt with Qin. They would directly kill him on the spot, not giving him any chance to escape. Dead men tell no tales. Whatever the royal sacred sect said would be the truth. There's no right or wrong, only grudges. Qin Wentian, the Saint Emperor is magnanimous and gave you a chance. However, you still have to die. There's no way you can survive. Zaiqiu stepped out. Since Qin was already dead, killing Qin Wentian could also be considered as revenge for Sun Qing. Let me kill him, Saint Xia said. I'll do it myself. Zaiqiu's voice was ice cold. His strength wasn't any weaker compared to Xiaosheng. After all, his surname was Zai, and the amount of cultivation resources he obtained from the royal sacred sect far surpassed Xiaosheng. There's no need to argue. Who are the ones who killed Qin? All of you can come at me together. Qin Wentian arrogantly spoke. As the sound of his voice faded, the entire space froze as everyone stared at Qin Wentian. Even the medicine sovereign, Mo Qingqing, and the others were all astonished. Didn't this guy know who he was facing? Xiaosheng and Zaiqiu were both supreme experts who had comprehended 4 types of true intents. In addition, they also had powerful bloodlines and extraordinary combat prowess. In the entire royal sacred region, it was extremely rare to find someone at the Heavenly Dipper realm who could defeat them. Qin Wentian actually said that he wanted his opponents to come at him together. Does he really think he is unrivaled in Heavenly Dipper? Many people coldly laughed in their hearts. Qin Wentian's talent was indeed strong. Could it be that because of his achievements, it caused him to not know the immensity of the heavens and earth? False reputation misleads people. I also participated in Qin's death. Killing you is already enough for me. Another person besides Zaiqiu spoke. This person had also entered the Immortal Palace before and was extremely powerful. Qin Wentian remembered that this person's control abilities were extremely strong, and he had an ancient vine astral soul. In that case, all of you can scram out here together. Qin Wentian pointed his halberd at the 3 people in front of him. His voice was as arrogant as ever, unexcelled in the world. I've never seen such an arrogant and ignorant person before. You are the first, and you even dared to do so in my royal sacred sect. My horizons have truly been broadened. That person's gaze was as sharp as a blade as he stared at Qin Wentian. Since he wants to die faster, we shall grant him his wish. A malevolent smile flickered in Zaiqiu's eyes. Although he wanted to show off in front of the sacred emperor, since Qin Wentian wanted to die so badly, he could only do as he wished. You have to kill him in a single strike. I don't want to see such an arrogant and ignorant face ever again. Such an ignorant person actually managed to become famous throughout the royal sacred region, and was almost recruited into the royal sacred sect. What a humiliation. Zaiqiu stepped out, with Xiaosheng and the other person on his left and right respectively. A terrifying aura gushed forth as the sound of whistling echoed in the air. The destructive might contained within was sufficient to bury Qin Wentian. On Qin Wentian's body, strands of green light flashed as though a green seed had been planted on his body. Rumble. The person beside Zaiqiu abruptly erupted with an incomparably intense green light. Instantly, an incomparably gigantic ancient vine manifested behind him. This was none other than his astral nova. The vine frenziedly extended outwards, blotting out the sky and directly enveloping the entire space. Boundless green light cascaded downwards, unceasingly landing on Qin Wentian's body. Numerous vines coiled around Qin Wentian, wanting to bind Qin Wentian. Not only that, there were even green needles piercing into Qin Wentian's body. A numbing sensation gushed forth, causing Qin Wentian's entire body to tremble. It was as though his entire body was being jolted by an electric current. What a powerful combination of astral souls. It's even more terrifying after transforming into true intense. Qin Wentian silently mused. Abruptly, numerous motes of light appeared around him. These motes of light shone on every part of his body, resembling astral light, yet it wasn't astral energy. It was as though he was clad in a layer of astral armor. This was a brand new type of energy that flickered in and out of existence, causing Qin Wentian's body to feel blurry and indistinct, as though he would disappear at any moment. At this moment, that expert felt that the green needles had no way to pierce into Qin Wentian's body. The light spots around Qin Wentian seemed to be a type of mysterious energy that possessed an extremely strong defense. Not only that, it gave off a sense of violence, as though the moment it erupted, it would unleash a terrifying might. This type of energy was indeed a brand new type of energy. It was formed from the condensation of 3 different true intents. The true intent of demon, force, and dream. Qin Wentian named this energy as illusory demon force. Illusory represented dreams, demon corresponded to the true intent of demon, and force corresponded to the true intent of force. This brand new energy was something that Qin Wentian had comprehended from Di Tian's combat experience. It had many wondrous uses, and was one of the greatest harvests he obtained from this trip to the Immortal Palace. One of the uses of the illusory demon force was defense. Not only was it sturdy, it could also be both real and illusory at the same time. It had the effect of reducing the destructive power of the opponent's attacks. There were many extremely powerful experts in the surroundings. They naturally could tell how extraordinary this brand new energy was. It was formed from the true intents of mandates. However, when the true intents of mandates fused into a brand new energy, it was extremely hard to tell which true intents were fused together. Just like in the sword comprehension grass hut, the sword attacks of the grass hut were formed from the fusion of true intents. They were formless and formless, as though they had lost the characteristics of their original true intents. Even for the same 2 types of true intents, different people could fuse them together to form different types of energy. Qin Wentian's illusory demon force was formed from the insights Qin Wentian comprehended himself. There seems to be the true intent of dreams, as well as a surge of violent energy. It might be the fusion of the true intent of demons and dreams. An expert from the royal sacred sect spoke, as though reminding Zai Qiu and the others to be careful. Once the true intents were fused into a brand new energy, the power unleashed would be multiplied. The reason why Xiaosheng was the leader of Heavenly Dipper sovereigns in the royal sacred sect was precisely because he had fused 2 types of true intents together. Qin Wentian advanced step by step as the power of his bloodline erupted forth. A demonic glow shone from him as the illusory demon force enveloped his body, making him seem like a descendant of a supreme demon king. A destructive might that could destroy everything erupted forth. Chi. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, as Qin Wentian advanced step by step, the vines that were madly entangling him were instantly disintegrated into dust. They only saw a flash of light, as though this was the effect of a brand new energy, directly shattering the vines that were entangling him into dust. What energy is this? The hearts of the crowd pounded as they stared at the young man that exuded a demonic glow. Could it be that Qin Wentian wasn't ignorant and arrogant? Instead, he truly had unrivaled talent that could suppress all Heavenly Dipper sovereigns? Such strong self-confidence naturally originated from his incomparably tyrannical strength. At this moment, the tyrannical aura radiating from Qin Wentian already caused Zai Qiu and the other 2 to feel an intense threat. The light that enveloped him was a kind of energy that could destroy everything. Humiliation? Qin Wentian stared at Zai Qiu and the other two as he icily spoke. Today, the three of you shall become the humiliation of the royal sacred sect, nailed to the pillar of shame in the history of the royal sacred sect. As the sound of his voice faded, he rushed out, transforming into an illusory beam of light. Zai Qiu and the other two could only see an illusory shadow, flickering in and out of existence. As for that expert who used the vines to bind Qin Wentian, he was currently in a miraculous state. There was only him and Qin Wentian. At the instant when Qin Wentian's halberd pierced towards him, it was as though only that halberd remained in this entire world. No. His body trembled. He discovered that no matter how he defended, it was all futile. This was a halberd technique that could destroy him in a single strike. Bang! While he was still immersed in the illusory state, the halberd had already landed on his body. In just an instant, his entire body turned into dust, disappearing from this world. A single strike, annihilated. Not only that, he vanished into thin air. Regardless of the true intent of demon or force, both were incomparably tyrannical energies that were famed for their attacks. How violent would the fusion of the three true intents be? At the instant the halberd landed, all the targets of the attack would be enveloped by the boundless illusory demon energy, turning into dust, just like that expert. This halberd strike directly shattered the confidence of the experts of the royal sacred sect. They stared in shock at the vanishing silhouette, only to see Qin Wentian lifting his palms once more, launching another attack towards Zai Qiu. Chapter 648. Zai Qiu initially thought that the three of them would directly deal a fatal blow to Qin Wentian, killing him on the spot. However, he didn't expect the situation before his eyes. Qin Wentian only needed a single strike to kill their comrade. This halberd strike caused them to be stunned. Their hearts pounded violently as they felt their breathing quickening. However, to Zai Qiu, he didn't have the time to be stunned, because Qin Wentian's halberd instantly turned towards him. That flickering light seemed to have brought him into an illusory world. In this world, only that halberd strike had no way to evade. Feeling the terrifying destructive might contained within that halberd strike, Zai Qiu's body trembled. He felt that even his strongest attack wouldn't be able to defend against the might of that halberd strike. This halberd strike was capable of penetrating through his body, destroying him. Bzzz. An intense light flashed as a terrifying corrosive energy gushed forth. Zai Qiu's fist blasted out as a divine weapon actually appeared in his hands. At the instant this divine weapon was released, the entire space seemed to be corroded away. The halberd in Qin Wentian's hand stabbed out explosively, causing piercing sounds to ring out unceasingly. Astral light erupted forth as he retreated, instantly increasing the distance between him and Qin Wentian. 5th rank divine weapon. Qin Wentian stared at Zai Qiu only to see a black-colored treasure in his opponent's right hand that exuded a terrifying corrosive energy. Numerous threads resembling the tentacles of an octopus extended outwards in all directions, causing the space around Zai Qiu to turn black. Is this the pride of your Zai clan? Divine weapon? A mocking smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face, causing Zai Qiu to feel a burning sensation on his face. He actually used a 5th rank divine weapon? This was undoubtedly admitting that he was useless and needed the help of a divine weapon to defend against Qin Wentian's attack. Zai Qiu, surnamed Zai, a heaven chosen of the royal sacred sect, how awe-inspiring. The mocking smile on Qin Wentian's face grew thicker and thicker. His gaze swept over the experts of the royal sacred sect. All of them had ashen expressions on their faces. Today they wanted to execute Qin Wentian on the spot. However, because of the arrival of the immortal martial realms experts and the medicine sovereign, the sacred emperor personally came to spectate the battle. They initially thought that Zai Qiu and the others would be able to kill Qin Wentian with their overwhelming combat prowess. Yet things didn't go as they wished. Qin Wentian used absolute strength to kill the heaven chosen of the royal sacred sect, intimidating Zai Qiu into taking out a 5th rank divine weapon with a single strike. The sacred emperor was spectating the battle. Yet the heaven chosen of the royal sacred sect couldn't do anything to an outsider. How humiliating was this? Not only that, Qin Wentian even pointed at their noses and humiliated them. B. A terrifying surge of dream force gushed forth as an ancient blood-colored halberd appeared in Qin Wentian's hands. This was none other than the Scarlet Demon Halberd. Strands of the true intent of dreams were infused into it as Qin Wentian moved once more, rushing towards Zaiqiu. With a wave of his hand, the Scarlet Demon Halberd shot out. Zaiqiu's eyes stared at the halberd, and in an instant, he was trapped in a space of purgatory. When Qin Wentian activated the Scarlet Demon Halberd with his true intent, no matter how strong Zaiqiu's will was, he would still be trapped in the dreamscape created by the Scarlet Demon Halberd. The divine weapon in Zaiqiu's hands erupted forth, blotting out the skies. Numerous corrosive black tendrils extended out in all directions. Yet in this blood-colored space, terrifying ancient halberds were unceasingly stabbing towards Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian's silhouettes could be seen everywhere. Damnable dreamscape. Zaiqiu's countenance turned pale. The offensive power of his divine weapon was extremely powerful, but in this dreamscape, it was basically useless, unable to display any effect. Pucci. The blood-colored ancient halberd pierced into his body, causing Zaiqiu's entire body to tremble uncontrollably. Bean-sized droplets of sweat unceasingly flowed down his face as he howled in a hoarse voice. And now, in this endless dreamscape, he would fall sooner or later. A terrifying sense of danger gushed over. Zaiqiu could hear the rumbling sounds of attacks ringing out in his ears. After which, the dreamscape vanished. He only felt his entire body devoid of strength as he panted heavily. In front of him, a blood-colored ancient halberd pierced through the head of an expert, aiming straight for him. Senior brother. Zaiqiu's body trembled as he saw the silhouette of the expert. He could feel his entire body shivering as a chill ran down his spine. That sense of danger was real. Qin Wentian had used the Scarlet Demon Halberd to unleash a sure-kill attack. However, at the crucial moment, Xia Sheng had taken the brunt of Qin Wentian's attack for Zaiqiu, becoming Zaiqiu's substitute, and was slain by the Scarlet Demon Halberd. BZ. A gust of wind gusted by. Xia Sheng's body seemed to have disintegrated into nothingness, disintegrating into nothingness. Just like his comrade earlier, his soul was shattered into pieces. Qin Wentian's eyes were ice-cold as his killing intent soared. Zaiqiu's eyes were scarlet red. And just when Qin Wentian was preparing to continue his attack, numerous terrifying auras gushed over. A gust of wind swept Zaiqiu's body away as a few people appeared before Qin Wentian. Zaiqiu, surnamed Zai, was a descendant of the Sacred Emperor. Although the Sacred Emperor couldn't be bothered with him, the people of the Royal Sacred Sect couldn't ignore him. Qin Wentian had already killed Xia Sheng. They knew that if they continued fighting, Zaiqiu would definitely die in Qin Wentian's hands. It was already enough. Qin Wentian had truly done enough. They absolutely couldn't allow him to continue being so brazen and kill Zaiqiu in front of the Sacred Emperor. Didn't we settle this ourselves? Qin Wentian lifted his Scarlet Demon Halberd and pointed it at the silhouette blocking his path. Today, you acted so impudently in my Royal Sacred Sect. The Sacred Emperor won't hold it against you, but this matter ends here. Now scram. The person in front of Qin Wentian had a gaze as cold as the edge of a blade. A terrifying might bore down on Qin Wentian, causing Qin Wentian to feel a boundless pressure bearing down on his arms, making it hard for him to lift them up. Do you guys treat the words of Senior Sacred Emperor as farts? Qin Wentian mocked, his words causing the experts from the Royal Sacred Sect to stiffen. Although the Sacred Emperor was a few generations away from Zaiqiu, they were still related by blood. Most probably, the Sacred Emperor wouldn't wish for Zaiqiu to die, right? Your strength isn't bad. Why don't you join the Royal Sacred Sect? At this moment, a voice drifted over. It was none other than the voice of the Sacred Emperor. These words were naturally directed at Qin Wentian. Senior Sacred Emperor, you should have already seen how the Royal Sacred Sect bullies others. Why should I join the Royal Sacred Sect? Qin Wentian stared at the horizons as he replied. How dare you? The experts from the Royal Sacred Sect all turned ashen. In front of the Sacred Emperor, Qin Wentian actually dared to speak so rudely? The Royal Sacred Sect is the overlord of the Royal Sacred Region. The Sacred Emperor calmly spoke, No emotions could be heard from his voice. What does that have to do with me? Join the royal sacred sect and become their vassal? Qin Wentian's countenance was calm as he stared in the direction of the void. Even if I don't join the royal sacred sect, I can still dominate the heavenly dipper sovereigns of the royal sacred sect. In the future, when I step into the peak of celestial phenomenon, I can similarly dominate the celestial phenomenon ascendants of the royal sacred sect. What's the use of joining the royal sacred sect then? The arrogance in his calm voice caused the hearts of everyone to tremble. Even if he didn't join the royal sacred sect, he could still dominate the heavenly dipper sovereigns of the royal sacred sect. Since he was unrivaled in heavenly dipper, what's the use of joining the royal sacred sect? His words were undoubtedly filled with disdain towards the royal sacred sect. However, the experts from the royal sacred sect didn't know how to refute. Little fellow, you are too arrogant. The sacred emperor faintly spoke. From afar, a supreme pressure enveloped Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian seemed to have seen a pair of eyes from afar. That pair of eyes gleamed with a light that caused Qin Wentian to feel a sense of suffocation. At this instant, he felt as though his entire body was out of his control. That pair of eyes that came from the void seemed to be able to penetrate through his body. The path you have to walk is still too long. You guys can leave now. The sacred emperor faintly spoke, after which, that pressure vanished without a trace, and that pair of eyes vanished as well. His emotionless voice was like a command. That was the sacred emperor, an immortal. No matter how high one's talent was, in front of immortals, they were still existences akin to ants. From the ancient times until now, there were so many geniuses in the royal sacred region, but how many of them could become immortals? I will listen to seniors' teachings. Qin Wentian stared at the horizons as he politely spoke. No matter how the sacred emperor questioned him, he was still the sacred emperor, an immortal. Qin Wentian had a ferocious tiger in his heart. His will was extremely resolute. The path of cultivation was long. There was no need for him to prove anything to others. However, the royal sacred region wouldn't be his final destination. This piece of sky was merely a part of his life. After speaking, Qin Wentian turned and held onto Mo Qingqing's hand. The two of them exchanged a smile as they walked to the side of the medicine sovereign. If the sacred emperor didn't wish for Zaiqiu to die, it was impossible for him to kill Zaiqiu. The situation today could already be considered peaceful. The experts from the royal sacred sect didn't act because the immortal martial realm and the medicine sovereign had arrived. If not, the sacred emperor wouldn't have appeared. However, Qin Wentian didn't think that this was the main point. He wanted to kill Zaiqiu, and since Zaiqiu had witnessed Xiaosheng's death, how could he spare him? In any case, the grudge between him and the hegemon of the royal sacred region, the royal sacred sect, had already been formed. Senior medicine sovereign, let's leave. Qin Wentian spoke. The medicine sovereign stroked his long beard as he smiled and nodded his head. It wasn't easy for Qin Wentian to be able to put down his sword. Sacred Emperor, farewell. The medicine sovereign stared at the horizons as he spoke, after which, the experts from the medicine sovereign valley soared into the air and departed. Junior Wu Mu, farewell. The experts from the immortal martial realm also departed one after another, as though they had never been here before. As for those from the royal sacred sect, they all felt as though they had lost all faith. Qin Wentian used his actions today to prove to the royal sacred region that even if he was inferior to the royal sacred sect, he was still unrivaled in heavenly dipper. What was the point of joining the royal sacred sect? Are you still not coming out? Another faint voice drifted over. It was the voice of the sacred emperor. The hearts of many experts from the royal sacred sect tightened. There was actually still someone here? They actually didn't discover it. In the air, intense spatial fluctuations could be felt, after which, a golden screen of light cascaded downwards as a graceful silhouette descended from the skies, standing in the air, akin to a celestial maiden. Who is this female? Many people furrowed their brows. It was actually a young female, yet they didn't discover her existence at all. She must have some sort of spatial treasure. The eyes of this female were cold, as she stared at the experts from the royal sacred sect. Her entire body was flawless, and even when she stood before the experts of the royal sacred sect, she still exuded a magnificence that surpassed the generations, causing people to think of Qin Wentian's fiancé, Mo Qingcheng. Both of them had different demeanors, yet both of them exuded an extremely powerful aura. If anything happens to him, I will raise the entire royal sacred sect to flat ground. A cold and melodious voice rang out from the mouth of the female, after which she turned and departed. At this instant, the experts of the royal sacred sect were all stunned. They even forgot to block her. The hegemon of the royal sacred region. Today, they heard the most brazen voice in their history. Chapter 649. The experts of the royal sacred sect were countless. At this moment, all of them were dumbfounded. As the absolute hegemon of the royal sacred region, a single word from the royal sacred sect was the law under the heavens. Nobody dared to defy them. But today, a dazzling young woman with a mysterious glow appeared here with a spatial treasure. In front of the experts of the royal sacred sect, and even the sacred emperor, she threatened them that if anything happened to her, she would definitely raise the entire royal sacred sect to flat ground. Such unexcelled arrogance toppled the logic of the experts of the royal sacred sect. What sort of person would dare to say such arrogant words? However, that spatial treasure was truly too powerful. Many of them were at the upper third level of celestial phenomenon, yet they didn't discover her presence. It seemed that only the sacred emperor knew of her existence. Moreover, even though she was very young and her voice was crisp and cold, there was an unquestionable determination in her beautiful eyes. It was as though she would be able to do what she said. Capture her. When the young woman left, only then did everyone realize that they were stunned by a single sentence from her. A cold voice rang out, filled with a towering coldness. It was none other than a peak-level celestial phenomenon ascendant of the royal sacred sect. As a hegemon of the royal sacred sect, how could they tolerate such threats? However, they only saw a golden light illuminating the skies as a terrifying spatial energy permeated the area. That beautiful silhouette stepped onto a bridge of nothingness, directly stepping into the void. When the barrier of light closed, her silhouette had already vanished completely. The experts of the royal sacred sect sped over only to hear a calm voice drifting over. She has already left. Left. The experts of the royal sacred sect were all dumbfounded. What a powerful spatial treasure, able to conceal herself so well that no one could detect her presence. Sacred Emperor, this woman threatened our royal sacred sect. She deserves death. An old man coldly spoke. Can you guys capture her? The emotionless voice rang out, causing the eyes of the old man to freeze. After which, the sacred emperor continued. That woman shouldn't be someone from the royal sacred region. The hearts of everyone trembled, yet that old man continued. What should we do then? Humph. A cold snort rang out, containing a hint of dissatisfaction within. The entire space turned silent. The experts of the royal sacred sect all felt a sense of pressure. The sage emperor seemed dissatisfied with them. Today Zaiqiu, Xiaosheng and the others from the royal sacred sect undoubtedly had the ability to contend against Qin Wentian. Yet they were still humiliated by Qin Wentian in public. No wonder the sacred emperor was unhappy. Although his status was transcendent, and he had long stopped caring about the matters of the royal sacred region, it was inevitable for him to feel both joy and anger, let alone the fact that the royal sacred sect was being threatened. However, after this cold snort, the aura of the sacred emperor completely dissipated. The experts of the royal sacred sect were silent for a long time before they sighed. What should they do? Did they still need the sacred emperor to teach them? No wonder the sacred emperor was unhappy. The matters today had already disturbed the sacred emperor, and even caused the royal sacred sect to lose face. Upon thinking of this, the experts of the royal sacred sect couldn't help but feel anger in their hearts. They ruled over the world. When had they ever been so aggrieved? However, Qin Wentian had no idea what was happening here. That woman who had been protecting him for over 10 years had never once betrayed him. She had always been silently standing behind him. Even though there were many times when he couldn't see her existence, he couldn't see her. The matter of the royal sacred sect naturally shook the entire world. Although this matter happened in the royal sacred sect, Qin Wentian and the others had all left safely. In that case, there was no way to hide this matter. Naturally, other than the appearance of that maiden who exuded magnificence through the generations. At that time, only the experts of the royal sacred sect were present. They wouldn't publicize this matter. The medicine sovereign personally came. The realm lord of the immortal martial realm led the envoys of the immortal martial realm to invite Qin Wentian to join them, even if it meant offending the royal sacred sect. The mysterious immortal martial realm appeared in the vision of the crowd. So it turned out that the immortal martial realm was also a major power. Every 10 years, the immortal martial realm was actually to recruit the most outstanding heaven chosen. Because of this, even the sacred emperor of the royal sacred sect appeared. Although it wasn't his true self, he still spoke. In front of the sacred emperor, Qin Wentian slew Xiaosheng, Shang Li and the other 2 heaven chosen of the royal sacred sect. Zai Qiu, who arrogantly told Qin Wentian to go apologize to him, didn't dare to fight, and chose to hide under the protection of the experts of the royal sacred sect. In front of the sacred emperor, Qin Wentian announced to the entire world that there was no need to join the royal sacred sect. He was still unrivaled in Heavenly Dipper, easily killing the strongest Heavenly Dipper sovereigns of the royal sacred sect. What was the point of joining the royal sacred sect? There were already many people who paid attention to this matter. This battle naturally became the topic of discussion for the people of the royal sacred region. Using only half a year's worth of time, Qin Wentian went from being in a stalemate with Di Shi on the sacred battle platform to comprehending a true intent of mandates and becoming unrivaled in Heavenly Dipper, completing yet another magnificent transformation. Such a transformation was something that countless people had no way to achieve. There were many people with talent who could step into the celestial phenomenon realm, but this didn't mean that they would be able to dominate all Heavenly Dipper sovereigns in the world when they were at the peak of Heavenly Dipper. After all, there were many celestial phenomenon ascendants, but existences like Qin Wentian were extremely rare. However, just as Qin Wentian's name shook the world once again, he suddenly vanished without a trace. After the royal sacred sect left with the medicine sovereign, there was a total of 3 to 4 months where no news of Qin Wentian was heard. There were people who said that he might have left the royal sacred region together with experts from the immortal martial realm. There were also people who said that since Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing were already engaged, they should be holding a secret wedding ceremony. Naturally, this was merely the conjecture of the masses. During these few months, Qin Wentian didn't do many things. The most important thing he did was still cultivation. Di Tian was still undergoing tests in the Immortal Palace as his strength grew bit by bit. During these few months, when Qin Wentian was in the Medicine Sovereign Valley, Mo Qingqing concocted many medicinal pills to aid him in his cultivation. These weren't pills that forcefully increased his cultivation base, but rather, they were pills that could solidify his foundation and unlock his potential. Finally, Qin Wentian stepped into the final level of Heavenly Dipper, the 9th level of Heavenly Dipper. Although his combat prowess was already unrivaled in Heavenly Dipper back when he was in the Royal Sacred Sect, he was only at the 8th level of Heavenly Dipper. After a few months, he finally stepped into the 9th level of Heavenly Dipper. The next level was to form his constellation, stepping into the celestial phenomenon realm. Right now, the only thing Qin Wentian felt depressed about was that even after stepping into the 9th level of Heavenly Dipper, Di Tian still had no way to defeat those immortals whose cultivation bases were sealed. Those fellows were simply too powerful. Their memories and sentience weren't sealed, only their cultivation bases were sealed. Their proficiency in the usage of true intent, as well as their fusion techniques, had already reached the peak of perfection. They also had their own immortal arts that contained boundless might, but Di Tian's rate of improvement similarly caused those immortals to feel shock in their hearts. In the Medicine Sovereign Valley, spring was in full bloom. Everything was filled with greenery, and numerous immortal-like residences were built in the midst of the lush mountains. The fragrance of flowers permeated the air, and even the air was exceptionally fresh. On a green floating bridge, There was a simple wooden courtyard that was shrouded in mist, resembling a celestial realm. A maiden leaned against the railing of a green vine as she stared at the mountain peaks in the distance. The maiden was dressed in white, resembling a celestial maiden, and had a faint smile on her face. She was even more beautiful than the scenery before her. A figure stood behind the fairy-like woman in white. His hands were wrapped around her slender waist. The fairy gently leaned back. Her head just happened to be touching the face of the figure behind her. If others saw this scene, they would definitely be envious of the young man behind her. Lecher. Behind him, a snow-white puppy lay on the vine. It had a carefree expression on its face as it glanced lazily at Qin Wentian. However, its immature voice was completely ignored by the two of them. During this period of time, only Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing were here, living a wonderful life that only a pair of mandarin ducks would envy, not immortals. Why aren't you cultivating anymore? Master said that since you've already comprehended the fusion of true intents, it shouldn't be too difficult for you to break through to the celestial phenomenon realm. As long as your cultivation base reaches the peak of the 9th level of Heavenly Dipper, success would follow naturally. Mo Qingqing turned her head and smiled at Qin Wentian. Staring at that flawlessly beautiful countenance and red lips, Qin Wentian lightly planted a kiss on her forehead, causing Mo Qingqing's face to turn red as she cursed in a low voice. Don't you hate it at all? You are so beautiful. Even if I were to live 3 lifetimes, I wouldn't hate it. Qin Wentian smiled as he kissed her again, causing Mo Qingqing to glare at him as she turned her head away. Qingqing. At this moment, Qin Wentian gently called out. Mo Qingqing turned her head back only to see Qin Wentian hugging her even tighter as he stared at her with a gaze as gentle as water. What's wrong? Mo Qingqing's heartbeat quickened. Marry me. Qin Wentian passionately spoke. It has been over 10 years, ever since they left Chu. The two of them had experienced too many things. Right now, there was no one in the entire royal sacred region who didn't know of their relationship. All of them were envious of them and wished them well. Mo Qingqing's eyes reddened as glistening tears flickered in them. She had been waiting for Qin Wentian to speak. Staring at the tears in Mo Qingqing's eyes, Qin Wentian gently caressed her face as he gently spoke. Breaking through to the celestial phenomenon realm isn't something that can be accomplished in a day or two. Qingqing, will you marry me? Mo Qingqing heavily nodded her head. Her eyes were red as she cried tears of joy. At this moment, the smile on her face was so beautiful that it caused the hearts of others to tremble. Where are we going? Are we going to stay at the Medicine Sovereign Valley? Mo Qingqing gently asked. We will naturally return to where we came from. Qingqing, it has been many years since you returned home. Qin Wentian sighed. Ever since Mo Qingqing went to the Pill Emperor Hall, she had never returned to Chu. In the blink of an eye, over 10 years had passed. How could Qingqing not miss home? What about Master and the rest? Naturally, we will invite them over together. Let's return to Chu first. Qin Wentian smiled. Mo Qingqing's heart was filled with warmth. She lightly leaned against Qin Wentian's chest. He should already know what was in her heart. Return to where they came from. She truly wanted to return home to take a look. Wentian, when are we going back? Mo Qingqing asked in a low voice. Right now, let's move out. Qin Wentian brushed his fingers through Mo Qingqing's long hair. After which, he hugged Mo Qingqing as he soared up into the skies, causing Mo Qingqing to be stunned. But an instant later, a smile appeared in her eyes, so beautiful that it could topple empires. Wait for me. A young and tender voice drifted over. After which, a beam of white light shot towards Qin Wentian's shoulder as the two of them soared up into the skies. Chu. It had already been over 10 years since they parted. How could Qin Wentian not miss his family? His father Qin Chuan, sis Qin Yao, teacher Mustang, were they all doing well? Chapter 650. In the Chu country, the Emperor Chu Wuwei was in power. Although he couldn't cultivate, he wholeheartedly propagated the martial Tao, causing the Chu country to flourish with each passing year. Once upon a time in the Chu country, Yuanfu realm cultivators were considered to be at the pinnacle. while Heavenly Dipper sovereigns were considered legends. But now, there were even Heavenly Dipper sovereigns roaming the Chu country. The various academies in the royal capital had contributed greatly to the prosperity of the Chu country. This was especially so for the Emperor Star Academy that Chu Wuwei supported. They had an abundance of resources and powerful innate techniques, nurturing many outstanding characters. Every year, the top 10 rankers of the Junlin banquet all originated from the Emperor Star Academy. Not only that, the names of the 10 prodigies were often obtained by students from the Emperor Star Academy. Other than the efforts of the emperor, the prosperity of the Chu country naturally couldn't be separated from the external world. Ever since the 9 Mystical Palace was destroyed, the Green Cloud Pavilion was the only power that could directly control the Chu country. The Green Cloud Pavilion didn't stand behind the scenes like the 9 Mystical Palace. Instead, they directly controlled Chu, Snow Cloud and the other 10 countries, merging them into the Green Cloud Imperial Empire. This Green Cloud Imperial Empire was controlled by the Green Cloud Pavilion from the shadows. Hence, the current Chu country was considered a subsidiary country of the Green Cloud Imperial Empire. The competition between the 10 subsidiary countries was extremely intense, causing the Chu country to flourish even more. Although it was a subsidiary country of the Green Cloud Imperial Empire, the Chu country was still independent and had a long history. Occasionally, there would be some famous historical figures who would become the topic of conversation among the citizens of Chu. An example would be Qin Wentian and Chu Mang of the Golden Generation. Prince Chu Mang was ranked first among the 10 prodigies, with unparalleled strength. And there was also Qin Wentian. He single-handedly toppled the Chu country's royal authority and even decided who the emperor of Chu would be. One could say that it was because of Qin Wentian that Chu Wuwei became the emperor of Chu. The royal capital of Chu, this ancient capital city, had experienced the baptism of wind and frost, yet it still stood tall. It had its own unique history and stories. To the current Qin Wentian, the royal capital of Chu was truly very small. Any random corner of the royal sacred region was bigger than the royal capital of Chu. But when he stepped into the airspace above the royal capital, an indescribable feeling appeared in his heart. 10 years had passed since he left Chu when he was 18 years old, heading towards Grand Xia to roam the world. Now, 10 years had already passed. Returning to his homeland, all the grudges and gratitude he had in the past were like fleeting clouds, dissipating like smoke. His heart was filled with warmth and memories, as a faint smile hung on his handsome countenance. Mo Qingqing was the same as well. It had been 10 years. How could she not miss her hometown? This was the place where she grew up, the place where she fell in love with Qin Wentian. I still remember that time in the dark forest. I misunderstood you and Fan Le. At that time, your back view was truly extremely stubborn. Mo Qingqing stared at the dark forest as she gently smiled, causing Qin Wentian to recall the scene back then. If it wasn't for that misunderstanding, I'm afraid you wouldn't even remember me. Fuck you. Mo Qingqing rolled her eyes at Qin Wentian, causing Qin Wentian to laugh uproariously. Back then, Mo Qingqing was the #1 beauty in Chu, while he was a member of the Qin clan that the royal clan wanted to deal with. Who would have thought that they would end up together? That tree is still there. Do you still remember the snow that day? The two of them strolled in the air, as Mo Qingqing pointed to an ancient tree and laughed. How can I forget? That moment when you called me a Dumbo and turned back to look at me. My soul was already hooked away. At that time, my Qingqing was like a little vixen. Qin Wentian joked. Mo Qingqing blushed as she pinched Qin Wentian's cheeks. The two of them reminisced about the past as they strolled in the airspace of Chu, recalling all the bits and pieces of the past. On the streets of Chu, there were people who inclined their heads and stared at the sky as their hearts involuntarily trembled. What a beautiful maiden. Those silhouettes stared at Mo Qingqing, unable to shift their gazes away. Compared to the maiden in front of them, the current #1 beauty in Chu was so insignificant. However, at this moment, this fairy-like maiden had a smile on her face as she held onto the hand of a young man. She had a blissful smile on her face, but she didn't know how moving her heart was. However, nobody dared to step into the air to disturb them. That unruly aura, fluttering long hair, and eyes that shone like the stars in the night sky, We're definitely not an ordinary character. Shall we go to Sky Harmony City first? Mo Qingqing gently asked. Qin Wentian's home was located in Sky Harmony City. Since we're already in the royal capital, we'll naturally go to your home first. Qin Wentian smiled. Staring at Qin Wentian's gaze, Mo Qingqing smiled and nodded her head. She believed that with the current Qin Wentian's attitude, there was no way he would be calculative about the matters of the past with her family. Qin Wentian naturally wouldn't be calculative. He wasn't so petty, and he deeply loved the maiden beside him. Naturally, he would accept the matters of the past. Everything that happened in the past, let it be buried in the wind. The Mo residence was still one of the few great clans in Chu. After Old Man Mo broke through to Heavenly Dipper, the status of the Mo residence rose by a lot. Also, there were rumors saying that the little miss of the Mo clan, the #1 beauty in Chu, Mo Qingqing, was accepted as a disciple by a major character from a transcendent power in Grand Xia. However, there were many who still had doubts about this. After all, so many years had passed, and no one had seen Mo Qingqing return. But even without Mo Qingqing, the status of the Mo residence was still extremely high. They had many guards, and the Mo residence was flourishing. At this moment, outside the Mo residence, there were many guards standing guard. At this moment, they inclined their heads and stared into the distance, unable to shift their gazes away. What a handsome man and woman, exuding magnificence through the generations. Not only that, the two of them actually floated in the air in front of them. You guys are. The guard stared at the two of them as he asked in bewilderment. Let's enter. Qin Wentian held onto Mo Qingqing's hand as they landed on the ground. After which, they slowly walked out. The guards only felt their vision blurring as the two of them disappeared from their sight. Everyone was greatly shocked as they turned and dashed into the residence. After entering the residence, Mo Qingqing slowly walked about, gazing at the grass and trees as an innocent smile appeared on her face. Many people were stunned when they saw the two of them. Finally, an older butler recognized Mo Qingqing. His body trembled in the wind as he bowed and asked, Miss Qingqing, have you returned home? I've returned home. Mo Qingqing nodded. The old butler stared at the smile on Mo Qingqing's face as tears flowed down his face. After which, he turned and ran into the Mo residence while shouting, Miss has returned, Miss Qingqing has returned home. Those guards who followed them and felt their hearts trembling when they heard the old butler's voice. Miss Qingqing. In the Mo residence, there was only a single Miss Qingqing. She was the #1 beauty in Chu 10 years ago, Mo Qingqing. The entire Mo residence was in an uproar. In the younger generation of the Mo residence, there was no one more outstanding than Mo Qingqing. Although she had already left home for over 10 years, there were still people who would occasionally mention this #1 beauty in Chu. Not long after, many people appeared before Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing. To Qin Wentian, these people were all strangers. He only knew Mo Qingqing's father, Mo Tianlin. But to Mo Qingqing, these people were all her family. Those elders who had watched Mo Qingqing grow up felt their hearts trembling when they saw her again. She was even more beautiful now, and her demeanor was even more majestic than before. Just by casually standing there, it was as though everything in this world had lost their luster. As for those juniors who had grown up, they were all dumbfounded. When they were young, they loved to surround their elder sister Qingqing because she was simply too beautiful. Now that they had all grown up, only when they saw Mo Qingqing again did they truly understand how soul-stirring Mo Qingqing's beauty was. So much so that when many people saw Qin Wentian holding on to Mo Qingqing's hand, their gazes were filled with unhappiness. This was especially so for some of the younger males. They didn't know who this young man was. Such a beautiful maiden from their Mo residence was actually captured by him? Father, mother. Mo Qingqing walked up and threw herself into the embrace of her parents. They hugged each other tightly, and only separated after a long period of time. Mo Tianlin stared at Qin Wentian as he sighed in his heart. This young man, whose name shook the entire Chu country during the Junlin banquet, had already undergone a complete transformation. His eyes were so deep that no one could see through him. After so many years, he was actually able to hold on to Mo Qingqing's hand, and bring her home together. 10 years, they had never been separated from each other. Uncle Mo Qin Wentian called out. "MHM. Mo Tianlin," replied as he nodded his head. "Seeing that the two of you can still be together, I feel much better in my heart." Back then, Mo Tianlin actually liked Qin Wentian very much. It was only because of the appearance of Hua Xiaoyan that he and his grandfather had different standpoints. Hence, he could only listen to his grandfather. "MHM, after we return to Chu, I will marry Qingcheng. Uncle Mo, you won't object, right?" Qin Wentian warmly smiled. Upon hearing his words, the people in the surroundings all trembled as they stared at Qin Wentian. Even Mo Tianlin was stunned. He glanced at Mo Qingcheng only to see her walking to Qin Wentian's side and holding on to his hand. Mo Tianlin knew that even if he objected, he wouldn't be able to change anything. Hence, he nodded his head and smiled. "Since Qingcheng is willing, I naturally have no objections." This time around, the people of the Mo residence were all shocked. Who was this young man? Why did Mo Tianlin agree to him so easily? Just based on Mo Qingcheng's beauty, how many outstanding characters would come to the Mo residence to propose marriage? Even with the nobility of the Green Cloud Imperial Empire, or even the outstanding characters of the Green Cloud Pavilion, their hearts would surely be moved. "Tianlin," an elder of the Mo clan called out, only to see Mo Tianlin interrupting. "Let's go, don't just stand here. Let's go and have a seat in the residence." "MHM. Qin Wentian and Mo Qingcheng nodded their heads. After they sat down in the residence, Mo Qingcheng was dragged away by her mother. Many people surrounded Qin Wentian as they contemplated him. There were even some who asked Qin Wentian about his cultivation base and his family background. Qin Wentian only smiled and didn't reply. He only focused on drinking his wine. At this moment, an old man walked over. This old man exuded the aura of dragons and tigers, exuding a faint aura of might. When he saw Qin Wentian, he was also stunned. "Father, this man came to propose marriage to Qingcheng, saying that he wants to marry Qingcheng." Someone reported. This person was none other than a brother of Mo Tianlin. At this moment, great waves of shock rose up in old man Mo's heart. Qin Wentian actually brought Mo Qingcheng back. He initially thought that he would never be able to see the two of them again. The crowd only saw old man Mo walking towards Qin Wentian. Upon seeing Qin Wentian standing up, old man Mo's back bent slightly as he politely spoke to Qin Wentian. "Take a seat." Qin Wentian started. He didn't expect old man Mo to be so polite to him. Old man Mo Qin Wentian wanted to say something, yet old man Mo personally poured a cup of wine for him. He then turned to Qin Wentian. "Qin Wentian, the matter's in the past." This old man was muddle-headed. "I've let you and Qingcheng down. Now that the two of you have returned, I'm already very satisfied. This time around, I will definitely make sure to properly arrange your wedding." Qin Wentian. Many in the crowd trembled when they heard this name. So it was him. No wonder he looked so familiar. Back then during the Junlin banquet, they had even seen him from afar a few times. This was the young man who once caused huge waves in the Chu country. Back then, he and Mo Qingcheng were in love, and now they were still together. However, didn't old man Mo disagree back then? Why was he so polite to Qin Wentian now? How could they know that back then when old man Mo saw Qin Wentian releasing his astral souls in anger, his heart and soul were already trembling? Thinking about it carefully, he also felt that he had let Mo Qingcheng down. After that, he roamed the Grand Xia Empire, and until now, there was a piece of news that he hadn't completely digested. The top ranker of the Heavenly Fate rankings, Qin Wentian, dragged the demon sword for 100,000 miles, sacrificing his blood to the demon sword, transforming into a great rock and splitting the Pill Emperor Hall apart. The Pill Emperor Hall was one of the transcendent powers of Grand Xia. Splitting the Pill Emperor Hall apart. All for the sake of Hongyan? Who was Hongyan? Mo Qingcheng. Nobody knew how shocked old man Mo was when he heard this news back then. It was as though he had been struck by lightning. Even now, he could still remember the expressions on the faces of the people of Grand Xia when they spoke about the legend of Qin Wentian. Chapter 651. After Old Man Mo learned of what Qin Wentian had done, he felt extremely guilty in his heart. This was especially so when he heard that the Pill Emperor Hall actually sacrificed Mo Qingqing's corpse. He strongly blamed himself. Although he was very powerful, Mo Qingqing was still his granddaughter. These matters, Old Man Mo had never told anyone in the Mo residence before. He himself didn't even know if Mo Qingqing was dead or alive. Now that he saw that Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing had returned together, he finally understood. Old Man Mo, let's drink a toast. Let the matters of the past be forgotten in this cup of wine. If Wentian was disrespectful in any way, please don't take it to heart. Qin Wentian raised his wine cup to Old Man Mo, his words causing Old Man Mo to laugh uproariously. Good, I can rest assured with these words of yours. In the future, leave Qingqing to me. This can be considered as having one less worry in my heart. Come, cheers. The two of them drained their cups of wine in a single gulp. Old Man Mo stared at the members of the Mo residence as he stated, "From now onwards, Qin Wentian is the son-in-law of my Mo residence." Mo Qingqing's beautiful eyes stared at Qin Wentian as a smile flickered in her eyes. She winked at Qin Wentian, appearing exceptionally mischievous. "Are you really Qin Wentian?" At this moment, a young man walked to the side of Qin Wentian, staring at Qin Wentian with curiosity in his eyes. This young man had delicate features, his eyes gleaming with a bright light. He didn't look like a silk pants from a major clan, but when he looked at Qin Wentian, an expression of hope could be seen in his eyes. You know me?" Qin Wentian smiled. This young man seemed to be around 18 years of age. Looking at him, Qin Wentian couldn't help but think of himself back then. Yes. The young man's face flushed red, as though he was extremely nervous. He stared at Qin Wentian. "My name is Mo Feng, I'm the cousin of Sis Qingqing. When you participated in the Junlin banquet, I was only 8 years old." Mo Feng. Mo Qingqing's beautiful eyes flickered as she stared in bewilderment at the handsome young man. That chubby little fellow from back then had actually grown so big. "Oh." Qin Wentian stared at Mo Feng as he nodded his head. Mo Feng stuttered, as though he was extremely anxious. "Brother-in-law, you are Mo Feng's idol. He has worshipped you for many years." The voice of a young girl drifted over as a slender and elegant maiden walked out from the side. She bore a slight resemblance to Mo Qingqing, and although she didn't have the magnificence of Mo Qingqing, she could still be considered a rare beauty, filled with the vitality of youth. Could this be Mo Yu? Mo Qingqing mumbled in a low voice. The person beside her laughed. "Qingqing, this is Mo Yu. In the blink of an eye, over 10 years have passed. When you left, she was still a little lass. But now, the number of people who came to our Mo residence to propose marriage is so high that the doorstep of our Mo residence is broken. Sis Qingqing." Mo Yu sweetly called out to Mo Qingqing. "Wentian, seems like we have all grown old." Mo Qingqing and Qin Wentian exchanged glances as they smiled. Mo Feng and Mo Yu were the children of her uncle. Back then they were still children, but now, they have already grown up. "Silly lass, you are already old. What does your mother count for?" Mo Qingqing's mother stroked her hair as everyone sighed in their hearts. Mo Qingqing was too beautiful, so beautiful that you would forget how young she was. It was as though the passage of time didn't leave any traces on her. "Brother-in-law, this is the first time we meet. Should I give you a greeting gift?" A mischievous look appeared on Mo Yu's face as she smiled sweetly at Qin Wentian. "Mo Yu, aren't your skin a little too thick?" Mo Feng spoke in disdain. "How can I be the same as you? Your face would turn red the moment you see brother-in-law. The girl you like doesn't even dare to confess, and you would only mumble to yourself every day." Mo Yu giggled as she stared at Mo Feng, causing Mo Feng to point at her. "You. A joyful smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face as he stared at this pair of sisters. With an intention of his will, he took out a dress from his robes. The dress was sparkling and translucent, and shone with a dazzling light. "Do you like it?" Qin Wentian stared at Mo Yu as he asked. "Wentian, is this a divine robe?" Old Man Mo could feel the fluctuations of astral energy. "Qin Wentian nodded. Mo Yu received the robe and smiled. "Thank you, brother-in-law." After speaking, Mou draped the robe over her body. Astral energy flowed from her body, seeping into the robe, causing an even more dazzling light to circulate around it. The robe actually glowed with light, resembling an armor of light. Mou jumped up in joy as she spun in circles. What weapon do you use? Qin Wentian stared at Mo Feng as he asked. Long spear. Mo Feng replied. Qin Wentian nodded. An instant later, a resplendent silver-white long spear appeared in his hands. He passed it over to Mo Feng as he spoke. Don't rely too much on divine weapons. Only use them when your life is at stake. Mo Feng received it as he nodded his head in agitation. In the Mo residence, Mo Qingqing still had many sisters from the clan. It was just that because of their age and personality, none of them came forward to ask Qin Wentian for a greeting gift. Mo was more lively and Mo Feng had always admired Qin Wentian since young. Wentian, if there's an opportunity, guide these disappointing fellows in their cultivation. Old man Mo laughed. Your cultivation base should have long broken through to the heavenly dipper realm, right? Old man Mo had no way to see through Qin Wentian's cultivation base. Qin Wentian faintly nodded his head, his words causing the hearts of everyone in the Mo residence to tremble. Such a young heavenly dipper realm cultivator was simply too terrifying. Qingqing has also broken through to the heavenly dipper realm for many years. Not only that, Qingqing's alchemy skills are even higher compared to her cultivation base. She is also revered by tens of thousands of people outside. Qin Wentian laughed. He wasn't trying to show off. At the very least, he wanted them to understand Mo Qingqing's current status and weight. He wanted them to weigh the consequences of their actions, and not create any unhappy events. And indeed, after hearing Qin Wentian's words, the countenances of everyone in the Mo residence changed. How many years has it been since she broke through to the heavenly dipper realm? Her alchemy skills were even higher compared to her cultivation base? It was impossible for them to imagine what sort of status Mo Qingqing had in the outside world. They didn't even dare to think about it. If they relied purely on their imagination, they would never be able to imagine such heights. After knowing the strength of Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing, the banquet was a joyous one. No one said anything unpleasant, and old man Mo was truly remorseful. Qin Wentian's final grudge vanished like smoke in thin air, and he truly treated Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing's parents as his own elders. Old man Mo drank a little too much, and he even took the initiative to say that he wanted to go to Sky Harmony City to fetch his in-laws, Qin Wentian, to discuss the marriage between Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing. This caused Qin Wentian to be speechless. He hadn't returned home for such a long time. He naturally had to go to Sky Harmony City himself. Not only that, with Qin Wentian's current strength, it wouldn't take him too long to travel from the royal capital of Chu to Sky Harmony City. After the banquet, Qin Wentian bade farewell, and headed towards Sky Harmony City. Mo Qingqing initially wanted to tag along, but Qin Wentian told her to stay at home to accompany his parents. He could see the feelings Mo Qingqing had for her parents, and how could he bear to bring her away after they had just reunited for such a short period of time? When they saw Qin Wentian riding on his flying sword, disappearing from their vision in an instant, the people of the Mo residence completely believed Qin Wentian's words. That kind of speed was impossible for old man Mo to possess. They were all thinking, this young man whose name shook the entire Chu country back then. What cultivation level had he reached now? Maybe they could ask Mo Qingqing about it. However, no matter how much they imagined, they would never be able to imagine the grandeur of Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing's wedding. Even if they saw it with their own eyes, they didn't dare to imagine what level it was. Sky Harmony City hadn't changed much. The emperor had long since bestowed Sky Harmony City to the Wu King. The Wu King Manor, which was also known as the Qin Residence, had absolute authority in this city. However, everyone understood that back then, Old Master Qin wanted to seize control of the world. It was only because Old Master Qin's schemes were too deep, to the point where he even included his own descendants in his schemes. This was the reason why Qin Wentian ultimately chose Chu Wuwei instead of the Wu King. After that, Old man Qin no longer cared about the affairs of Chu, and went out to roam the world. Maybe it was because of the guilt he felt towards his descendants, but he never returned. The title of the Wu King was inherited by Qin Chuan before he left. Hence, the current ruler of the Wu King Manor was none other than Qin Chuan. Today, in the Wu King Manor, Qin Chuan was playing chess with a white-haired old man. The body of the white-haired old man seemed to be somewhat weak, as he coughed occasionally. However, a gentle and refined smile could be seen on his face. "Father, please take some medicine." A beautiful lady at the side passed a cup of tea to the white-haired old man. The old man took the cup and drank a mouthful, before coughing a few times and shaking his head. "My body is weak, I can't be compared to the past. As for you, you are getting more and more healthy. You asked for it. If you didn't do those things back then, how would you be where you are now? Who knows, you might even be full of vigor and have many children and grandchildren." Qin Chuan grumbled. "Stop scolding me. Didn't I suffer retribution? You old man. Why do you say that every time we play chess, it's interesting? Are you trying to take revenge on me?" The white-haired old man sighed. Qin Chuan also sighed as he asked, "Is there still no news of Bai Qing?" "Nope, there's no news at all." The white-haired old man felt pain in his heart. Of his 2 daughters, the eldest was delayed by him, and the second was driven away by him. Later on, although he woke up to reality, things had already changed. This white-haired old man was none other than Bai Qingsong. "Uncle Bai, don't think too much. Bai Qing is so kind, she will definitely be fine." A beautiful lady beside Qin Chuan gently spoke. This lady was none other than Qin Yao. Although Qin Yao also hated Bai Qingsong in the past, Qin Wentian had already forgiven him. Not only that, Bai Qingsong had already changed his ways. Back then, when he came to Sky Harmony City, he visited Qin Wentian 7 times to apologize. Even Qin Chuan was touched by his sincerity. Let's hope so. Bai Qing and Wentian are so close, sigh. Bai Qingsong shook his head unceasingly. "Uncle Bai, don't worry. I also believe that nothing will happen to Bai Qing." A voice drifted over, causing the countenances of Bai Qingsong and Qin Chuan to stiffen. After which, a silhouette slowly descended from the air. This silhouette was clad in white, and was incomparably handsome, exuding an extraordinary aura. The gazes of the 4 people below froze as they stared dumbfoundedly at the silhouette of the young man. Qin Wentian stood on the ground, staring at the 4 people in front of him. His heart was filled with a myriad of emotions. His foster father's spirit wasn't bad, but he had aged a little. As for Bai Qingsong, what made Qin Wentian sigh the most was that Bai Qingsong had actually aged so much, resembling an old man past his prime. Most probably, Bai Qingsong had suffered many torments during these years. Qin Yao was still as beautiful as ever, and seemed even more mature than before. Looking at Qin Wentian, her eyes turned red as tears flowed down her cheeks. As for Autumn Snow, she stared at Qin Wentian in a daze. Her mind was in a mess, and when she saw Qin Wentian again, she couldn't help but feel nervous in her heart. The youth of the past had already grown to such an extent. Most probably, he was already a dragon amongst humans. "You brat, to think that you could still bear to return." Qin Yao cursed in a low voice, causing Qin Wentian to tremble as he smiled. "Sister Qin Yao." "Father." Qin Wentian bowed. Qin Chuan and Qin Yao both replied in a heavy tone. After which, the 3 of them exchanged glances and laughed as they walked towards each other, tightly hugging each other. Chapter 652. Qin Chuan and Qin Yao hugged him tightly, as they patted Qin Wentian's back repeatedly. "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. Father, your son is unfilial. It's been so many years and I haven't returned home to visit." Qin Wentian felt a tinge of guilt in his heart. "You need to pursue the path of cultivation outside. Everything is fine at home. There's nothing to worry about." Qin Chuan loosened his grip on Qin Wentian, but Qin Yao still couldn't bear to let him go. She hugged Qin Wentian tightly. "Sister, let me see if you're heavier." Qin Wentian lowered his head and stared at Qin Yao's teary eyes. Qin Yao let out a soft cry as he carried her up, causing Qin Yao to glare at him fiercely. But she still had a happy smile on her face. Sister, you're still so slim. Seems like there's no pressure carrying you on my back. Qin Wentian teased. After placing Qin Yao down, he asked, Did you find me a brother-in-law? Screw you. You're teasing me the moment you return. My younger brother is so outstanding. How could I possibly be interested in ordinary people? As for you, tell me honestly, did you bring any girls back? Qin Yao pointed her finger at Qin Wentian. Although the two of them hadn't seen each other for 10 years, they were still as close as ever. Some feelings wouldn't fade with the passage of time. And this was the case for Qin Wentian and Qin Yao. The moment they saw each other, it was as though they were pulled back to the past. Back then, they were still young, laughing and chatting happily. Back then, they were carefree and carefree. I brought back a sister-in-law for you. This time around, I still need father to help me propose a marriage. Qin Wentian laughed. Really? Qin Yao froze. Wentian, are you serious? Qin Chuan exclaimed in shock. Father, sister, there's no need to doubt me so much, right? Qin Wentian shrugged his shoulders. Where is she from? Why didn't you bring her to the Qin residence as a guest? Qin Chuan asked. She just returned to Chu. Initially, she wanted to come with me, but I told her to spend some time with her family. Qin Wentian replied. People from Chu. Qin Chuan and Qin Yao spoke at the same time. The two of them exchanged glances, only to hear Qin Yao laughing. What a good fellow. Speak. Was she the #1 beauty of our Chu country, Mo Qingqing? Sister, you're too smart. Qin Wentian smiled as he admitted, causing Qin Chuan to burst out in laughter. Good. I knew you would win her back sooner or later. Looks like you've succeeded. When do you want to propose a marriage? Just tell me, I'll get the entire Qin clan to act. Father, there's no need to be so exaggerated. Qin Wentian shook his head and smiled bitterly. Letting Qin Chuan propose the marriage was also out of respect for the elders of both sides. Qin Wentian hoped that the wedding would be as perfect as possible. At the side, when Bai Qingsong and Autumn Snow heard the news of Qin Wentian's wedding, they couldn't help but feel a myriad of emotions in their hearts. Even Autumn Snow's eyes dimmed slightly. Back then, she was the chosen of the Sky Harmony City, and had the opportunity to marry into the Yi clan. Hence, she ended her relationship with Qin Wentian. However, only after 10+ years had passed did she realize how narrow their vision was. Time could really change many things. Back then, they only saw the Chu country. But to the current Qin Wentian, the entire Grand Xia was no longer able to restrict him. Wentian, congratulations. Although Bai Qingsong sighed in his heart, he still gave his blessings. Thank you, Uncle Bai. Qin Wentian nodded his head to Bai Qingsong, before turning to Autumn Snow. Are you doing well? Seeing the bright eyes of Qin Wentian, smiling at her, Autumn Snow's eyes flashed with a hint of panic. She didn't dare to look at Qin Wentian in the eyes, and lightly nodded her head. The current Autumn Snow was no longer the young lady of the past, but her countenance was still as beautiful as before, with hints of maturity. Autumn Snow, has father not finished playing chess yet? A voice drifted over, and after which, a young man around 30 years of age walked into the courtyard. This person froze when he saw the handsome silhouette in front of Autumn Snow. After which, he walked to the side of Autumn Snow and lightly hugged her arm. Although there was a smile on his face, Qin Wentian could faintly sense the enmity in the eyes of this person. Autumn Snow's body stiffened, as she unexpectedly shifted to the side. Although she no longer had any relationship with Qin Wentian, when facing him, her heart was still as calm as still water. Autumn Snow, what's wrong? The young man gently asked. Nothing. Autumn Snow shook her head. A strange light flashed in the eyes of the young man as he smiled at Qin Wentian. Nice to meet you. I am Wuxia from the Green Cloud Imperial Empire. Autumn Snow is my fiancé. I am Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian naturally understood where this person's enmity came from. He casually smiled. I'm friends with Autumn Snow. Uncle Bai, Autumn Snow, congratulations. Qin Wentian gave his blessings. Autumn Snow lowered her head. Her heart was filled with complicated emotions. Bai Qingsong glanced at Wuxia, before glancing at Qin Wentian. Although there was a smile on his face, he sighed in his heart. The Green Cloud Imperial Empire? Although the Green Cloud Imperial Empire governed 10 countries, and was a subsidiary power of the Green Cloud Pavilion, Bai Qingsong knew the reason why the 9 mystical palace was destroyed. Even if the emperor of the Green Cloud Imperial Empire knew of Qin Wentian's identity, he wouldn't dare to show any disrespect. Brother Qin is the son of the Wu King? Bu Xiao asked. Qin Wentian nodded his head, causing a smile to appear on Bu Xiao's face. A mere son of the Wu King of the Sky Harmony City, he truly had no idea why Autumn Snow would have such feelings for him. Currently, the Chu country is a subsidiary country of the Green Cloud Imperial Empire. If Brother Qin is interested in expanding your horizons, I can arrange an official position for Brother Qin in the Green Cloud Imperial Empire. Bu Xiao smiled, his words causing the others to be stunned. This Bu Xiao was actually intentionally showing off in front of Qin Wentian. Many thanks for Brother Bu's kind intentions, but I, Qin, don't need it. Qin Wentian smiled and shook his head. Bu Xiao sighed. What a pity. All right, Brother Qin, let's play this game of chess again next time. I shall return first. At this moment, in order to avoid any awkwardness, Bai Qingsong took the initiative to bid his farewell. Who is this Bu Xiao? Qin Wentian stared at Qin Chuan as he asked. He's a young general of the Green Cloud Imperial Empire stationed in the Chu country. His father is a general of the Green Cloud Imperial Empire, and now that the Green Cloud Imperial Empire is in control of the subsidiary countries of the 9 mystical palace, their control over the 10 countries is already clear on the surface. Qin Chuan shook his head, he couldn't be bothered with this matter. Qin Wentian frowned when he heard this. Back then when he allied with the Green Cloud Pavilion, the 9 mystical palace was purged from the Chu country. After that, he didn't mind that the Green Cloud Pavilion controlled the subsidiary powers of the 9 mystical palace, but the Green Cloud Pavilion should know that his home was in Chu. Why didn't they inform the Green Cloud Imperial Empire about this? Let's hope he was overthinking things. Wentian, how have you been living these years outside? Quickly tell me about it. Qin Yao hugged onto Qin Wentian's arm as she smiled. Sis, you are still as clingy as ever. Qin Wentian teased. Let me pay my respects to my mother and uncle first. That's only natural. Let's talk while we walk. I will ask my mother to prepare a feast for you. Qin Yao hugged Qin Wentian as she hopped and skipped along. Her long hair was resting on Qin Wentian's shoulder. Qin Chuan followed behind the two of them, and upon seeing the relationship between this pair of siblings, he couldn't help but smile and shake his head. His heart was filled with warmth. We are a family now. It's time for us to have a reunion dinner. Qin Chuan clasped his hands behind his back as he hummed a little tune. It has been a long time since he was so happy. Qin Chuan's courtyard was naturally bustling with noise and excitement today. However, those who came were all his close relatives. Qin Chuan, Qin He, Qin Yi, the whole family gathered together. Of course, Qin Shang and Qin Ji came as well. They were now married, and Qin Shang even had a daughter named Qin Xian, who was 6 years old. Back then during the chaos in Chu, Qin He and Qin Yi were both injured. They hoped that their children would be able to have a descendant as soon as possible. Qin He was the first one to hug his granddaughter. Xian, quickly call him uncle. Qin Wentian hugged Qin Xian while Qin Yao teased her. Qin Xian was very beautiful, resembling a porcelain doll. Uncle. Qin Xian's childish voice rang out, causing Qin Wentian to laugh happily as he pinched her cheeks. Qin Yao, who was at the side, was dumbfounded as she spoke. Back then you treated me so well, and now you don't even want to spare your niece? This is called doting, do you understand? Qin Wentian teased. Qin Yao rolled her eyes. A younger brother was doting on his older sister? Uncle, why hasn't Xian seen you before? Qin Xian hooked her arms around Qin Wentian's neck, as though she was very fond of this uncle whom she met for the first time. This uncle's eyes were truly very beautiful, even cleaner and more beautiful than her parents' eyes. Uncle went to a very faraway place, and only returned today. Qin Wentian smiled. Is that so? Is it fun to go to a faraway place? Qin Xian's eyes gleamed with a bright light, filled with curiosity. Of course it's fun. In that case, can Uncle bring Xiner there to play as well? Sure, Uncle will bring Xiner there to play. Qin Wentian stared at the innocent Qin Xian as warmth filled his heart. He smiled. Big bro Qin Shang, you are truly blessed. You should also give birth to a child soon. Wentian, you are going to marry the #1 beauty of Chu, Mo Qingcheng. If the two of you give birth to a daughter, I can't even imagine how beautiful she would be. Qin Shang had already matured. Looking at Qin Wentian's demeanor, he knew that given Qin Wentian's talent, he had already achieved great things. It's still too early for me. Qin Wentian shook his head and smiled. He also liked Qin Xian, but if he had a child, he would have something to worry about. If he were to roam the world outside, he wouldn't have such a mentality now. Brother Qin Shang, I wish to bring Xian to play in the royal capital of Chu. Is it possible? Qin Wentian laughed. Xian is still so young. Would she not be used to it? Qin Yao's wife was very young, around 25 to 26 years of age. Mother, Xian likes uncle, it's fine. Qin Xian sat on Qin Wentian's lap, appearing very intimate. Naturally. Xian, you can play with Uncle Wentian. You are not allowed to cry. He glanced at Qin Shang. If Qin Wentian wanted to bring Qin Xian out to play, how could he mistreat Qin Xian? Wentian, this little fellow is very mischievous. If you are annoyed, just send her back. Qin Shang squeezed his wife's hand, hinting for her not to say anything. His wife also seemed to have realized that this young man she met for the first time had an extraordinary status in the Qin clan. Hence, she reluctantly nodded her head, feeling a little reluctant to part with her daughter. After all, to her, Qin Wentian was just a stranger. It was normal for her to be worried. This was something that Qin Wentian could understand. As to why he wanted to bring Qin Xian out to play, it was actually because he wanted Qingqing's help to change Qin Xian's physique. Qin Xian was still so young, and her meridians had yet to be formed. It was the easiest way to change her physique. Back then when the Yi clan brought people to the Sky Harmony City to hunt him down, Qin He had taken his place to face danger. That back view was something that Qin Wentian would never be able to forget. He had to repay this debt no matter what. Not only that, he himself also liked this child, Xian. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.